very good odds that this person is incredibly smart and attractive. There you go. Yeah, we're good. The OBS decided that it didn't want to actually pick the right mic, but we fixed that. Thank you for clarifying. Focus today, I gotta sleep, I got people coming over here later, but I'm marking my attendance slot. All good, buttresses. The outcome of the stream will be turned into a YouTube video that you can watch later. It's all good. Yippee, indeed. What I was saying is, sorry I'm late. Greetings, Brixton. Hello there, Paul. Sorry I'm late. I was over visiting my mother today. I try to do it every now and then. You know, I moved out. She's at this point living, you know, so I just wanted to make sure. I want to make sure I go over and visit every so often. And it was great. I had a great time. Ate some yummy food. Talked to my mom, who I love. It was all great. Did get into a very spirited discussion about childhood trauma and parenting. You know, generally, I guess, vaguely, with her and my brother and his wife and all that. So that was interesting. Took up more time than I expected. So now we're here a little later. It has done something interesting, though. I think I've been forced. Necessity being the mother of invention. I think I've been somewhat forced into coming up with some ideas, some actual structure for these kind of streams moving forward, right? Because my plan was, you know, I was gonna read my little Cuba book while I was there. I was gonna come back like an hour and a half before stream or something like that. I was gonna set up a little presentation and then we were gonna go over it, right? That didn't happen. I simply just did not have enough time to do that, considering where things ended up going with, again, the very spirited conversation. Depression Simulator Part 2? Oh yeah. But I did figure, you know, when I do that, like I did that last Tuesday, right? And it doesn't take that, like, you know, I go over and I prep this presentation, and going over it takes like an hour, which is not really, you know, does not a stream make necessarily. So we end up having to lean on, like, reacting to other content and shit a lot of the time, which is, I mean, it's nice in the sense that there's a lot to learn when you watch the Operation Condor video and you learn about death squads and kill lists and homeless target practice and the grill. But it's not a very sustainable structure to the stream, I think. In fact, it's not really any kind of structure to the stream at all. So I figured, partially because I just didn't have the time to do it beforehand, and also partially because when I thought about it, it struck me as an interesting structure for these things. I think an interesting way to do this is to have these streams have the goal of, at the end of the stream, coming out of it with one of these presentations, like set up and create it, and then going over everything we've learned briefly at the end of the stream by like giving this presentation, and like that turns into a video people can watch later. But you know, the first like two and a half whatever hours of the stream are just bringing you guys along for the ride in terms of any research that I'm doing or anything like that, and then we go from there. I think that is much more of, and this can be refined certainly over time, but I think that is much more of like an actual structure for the shit that I could do, as well as, honestly, like as I'm reading about some of this shit, I feel like having, like, the learning about it for the first time is kind of some of the most interesting parts, I think. It is just crazy to hear about some of this shit, you know? So, like, doing that, bringing you guys along for that ride, I think is probably a better way to do it. With that being said, so I have this whole, I think it's this right here. Yeah. I have this whole ass fucking Word doc of notes from this book that I'm reading. What is it? The Economic History of the War on Cuba, I think is its name. It's one we were reading a couple of, like a week ago or something like that. What horrors are we going to find out about this time? Oh, there's horrors. We're going to learn about them in depth, and then we're going to talk about them at the end. But yeah, I have this whole Word document of shit that I have learned about. Up until yeah, Reagan right here. Up until here is everything we talked about last time. It's all of this over here, right? From Batista getting overthrown by Castro, the CIA and Eisenhower not being very happy about this. Maybe at first it looked like they could maybe be friends for a little bit, but then as soon as Batista and his cronies robbed the central bank of like all of the money that was in Cuba and fled to the US, and the Castro government was like, hey, US, could you extradite these guys so they could face trial for their crimes? Nuh-uh. Okay, well, could you send us the money they stole at least? Nuh-uh. Okay, well, can we have an emergency loan to stabilize our rapidly crashing economy because they took all of the money in our bank? Nuh-uh. Okay, cool. Well, then fuck you. Our economy is based on agriculture, and you own all the fucking land and the agricultural shit. That's a lot of money. I'm gonna nationalize this shit and take it back from you. Every other country that had interests, economic interests in Cuba, was chill with that, except for the United States, who said, all right, fuck you, I'm gonna kill you. And they started sanctioning a whole bunch of shit. Eisenhower got rid of, he ended the sugar quota. He stopped buying Cuban sugar, which is a huge part of their exports generally, and especially to the US, and the US was their biggest trading partner. Kennedy made things even worse. He started, like, punishing other countries and making it so the ban was not just a ban on Cuban trade with the US, but on Cuban trade with almost anyone else in the world, anyone in America's sphere of influence. Lyndon B. Johnson made it even worse. Nixon made it even worse. Gerald Ford started relaxing some stuff mildly, and then in the face of like just an international community that was significantly more favorable towards Cuba and a lot less sold on the whole Cuba is a country that needs to be crushed for the benefits of freedom or whatever the fuck, Jimmy Carter relaxed the sanctions, still sanctions and still starving the country, absolutely, but relative to who came before him, relaxed the sanctions more than they had ever been up until that point, starting to try and normalize relationships with Cuba. And then, of course, you know, surely things will keep getting better, except that Reagan is the next president. And, you know, everything that Reagan touches turns to shit and hellfire and brimstone. So that's where we left off last time. So the goal for today is to get from Reagan at least to Obama. Then Reagan happened? Yes, then Reagan happened. And you can only imagine that when Reagan happened, everything got better and was super good. Also, hello, Harihara. Hi. Hello, Mr. Brixton. Hello there, Rob. But yeah, like, the goal for today, we're going to do some research. We're going to try and understand what happened in sort of broad overview terms with regards to the sanctions and how they evolved. From Reagan all the way to at least Obama. If we can manage it, maybe we can try and look into some of the more modern stuff, but I'll have to find a different source at that point because the book that I'm reading was written in 2013, so it only goes up to the Obama presidency. And then we'll go from there. Once that presentation is created, then we can talk about it, make it into a video, do the whole thing. I'm just gonna bring you guys along for the research ride, basically. So I did do a little bit of reading at my mom's house. I did do a little bit of reading. And as far as Reagan, obviously, no surprise at all, right? Basically everything, all the progress towards normalizations of relations that Carter made, Reagan reversed it. And it is notable that, you know, in Eisenhower's time and Kennedy's time, the general, like, public view of Cuba was, like, significantly more negative, right? Like, they weren't really, to my understanding at least, they weren't really having to fight public opinion too much to just be like, oh, like, you know, these evil communists need to be stopped. One of the reasons that Carter even started relaxing some of the sanctions in the first place is that, like, the international view of Cuba and what was happening in Cuba was getting significantly more negative, right? So it is extra special that Reagan reversed all this progress and then made things worse, considering at this point, like, he is actively going against the will of a lot of his constituents and the will of the international community, right? It is a significantly more unpopular thing that the US is doing at this point in time, but Reagan just doesn't care. Just wanted to, like, to highlight that he's doing that shit no matter, like, he doesn't care if people like it or not. He just is doing it for the love of the game, right? He implemented this thing called the Santa Fe program, which was basically just like a recommitment to overthrowing the Cuban government. He listed Cuba as a terrorist country in 1982. Carter had added, you know, he maybe started, like, providing, like, a little bit of aid to Cuba and things like that, some federal investment. Reagan rolled all of that back. Carter had lifted some of the trade restrictions, like, for example, ships could, like, dock in Cuba and then dock in the States and stuff like that. Reagan rolled back pretty much all of those. Carter had allowed people to start traveling to Cuba again, where before it was basically, like, effectively banned. You know, businessmen could do it. Eventually, like, even US citizens could travel there. Like, he relaxed a lot of the travel restrictions. Reagan, of course, rolled all of that back again. And in fact, Wayne S. Smith, we have to find a picture for and put him in the presentation, who was the head of the U.S. interest section in Havana, basically like one of the primary, like, you know, diplomats and also just people in the U.S. who politically was in charge of like relations with Havana and shit like this, was so like appalled by how like draconian and fucked up Reagan was being about this that he resigned from the State Department in protest. Of course, that didn't stop anything, but just, you know, again, Reagan was doing this shit no matter what anyone thought. He's doing it purely for the love of the game. He doesn't care what people think about it. Like, the others seem to at least do their best to get the people on their side a little bit more. Reagan just said, nah, fuck it, these Cubans are dying. I don't care who says what. They're dying because I said so. In 86, he even tightened the controls even more. Like, before this, he was just kind of rolling back all the progress that Carter made. Now he's going even further and making things even worse than they were before Carter. He created a blacklist. This concept, a blacklist. He created a blacklist of people and corporations that companies, whether U.S. or foreign, were entirely forbidden from doing business with. And, you know, at this point, like, tightening, people are already not happy about what the U.S. was doing in Cuba. Rolling back Carter's progress was one thing. Further tightening the sanctions, turns out, was so unpopular domestically and internationally, right, that even Reagan, he had to relax a little bit. He had to relax a little bit, right? And he allowed, oh, sorry, this is not Cuban exports. I believe this is, he allowed countries to sell exports to Cuba as long as they contained less than 10% American-made materials, right? Reagan agreed to allow foreign companies to export products to Cuba if they contained less than 10% components made in the United States, right? Allowed exports to Cuba by foreign companies that contained less than 10% U.S. materials, right? So he had to relax a little bit, but this is still, like, you know, considering the U.S. is the largest trading partner of almost every country on Earth right now, this is sort of a non-relaxation, but technically it's something, right? Anyway, 2 years later, he immediately about-faced again and passed the Omnibus Foreign Trade and Competitiveness Act, whose stated goal was the reinforcement of restrictions on imports from Cuba that added several dozen maritime companies to the blacklist that he had established earlier that restricted any foreign companies at all, domestic or foreign, from doing any kind of trade, from engaging in any kind of trade with those maritime companies that are on that blacklist, right? So, again, this blacklist is another way to punish not only Cuban companies, but also any companies that do work with Cuba, right? You could be a non-Cuban company, get put on this blacklist, and you are essentially embargoed from any trade with any country in the world because the U.S. said so, and they will pressure anyone who doesn't follow it into agreeing anyway, right? So, unsurprisingly, Reagan, he actually didn't do... It wasn't... How do I say this? It wasn't as bad as I thought, in the sense that he didn't, like, nuke the country or something. But I think the only reason for that is because he immediately followed Carter. He had a lot of work to do to just turn opinions around. Like, Carter had added a lot of momentum of things going in sort of the positive direction. Don't get me wrong. Again, I want to be very, very clear. Carter was still starving Cubans. Like, severely. But he was moving, things were moving in the direction of relations eventually normalizing, right? And there was a lot of momentum. There's a lot of international desire for that. Like, there was a lot of momentum in the other direction that Reagan had to fight when he got in office, which I think is what mostly limited him, right? Like, he had a lot of work to do to just destroy all the progress that Carter had made first before he could then go and fuck things up even further. But it is still very, you know, momentous what he did, because he did, like, turn it around. He fully steered the ship all the way back to the policy is murdering Cuba and everyone in it if it means overthrowing the communists, right? So, still very impactful and very horrible, but he actually mostly set the stage. Reagan doesn't care about literally anything besides destruction and malice. Yes, capitalism for capitalism's sake, right? Whatever maximizes profits for him and his buddies is the only shit he cares about, right? So what he really did is he put a lot of effort into turning the ship back around, turning perception back around, turning U.S. foreign policy towards Cuba back into being, like, just purely hostile and this country must die, which is very impactful because it sets the stage for our next two presidencies, which really surprised me. This is where this shit really starts to just become, like, truly otherworldly, the lengths that America is going to, right? So I managed to get a little bit further into my research at my mom's house. We could talk about George H.W. Bush. So, again, George W. Bush is his father. This is, like, the 90s? Yeah, I believe. It's, like, the early 90s, right? So, H.W. is the president of the United States. Carter was at least trying. Can't say the same about everybody else. Yes, again, like, I don't want to pretend that Carter is some, like, savior or anything like that. I don't want to, like, you know, for all intents and purposes, he was still, like, very much maintaining and upholding these same evil policies. I'm not, you know, it was just literally, it is the only time seemingly that things have been moving in the right direction, even if they were still way further to, like, on the side of bad. They were at least moving from bad to good, even if they were still like 7,000% bad. It was like 7,500% bad, and then it became 7,000% bad. It was moving in the right way. I don't want to give Carter too much credit, but I do want to give Carter at least the facts that he was the only president under which things got better for Cuba. So H.W. is president of the United States at a very interesting time, right? H.W. is president in the early 90s, which is, you know, the end, quote unquote, of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, which presented an interesting political situation for America, because the whole time, you know, for the past 30 years since the embargo had began in 62, the U.S. had been using the fact that Cuba was heavily allied with Moscow to justify the embargo and the killing of the Cubans. Now, again, very important to point out that Cuba's largest trading partner and greatest ally for the longest time was the United States. Why did Cuba's biggest ally become Moscow? The thing that the US then retroactively used to justify the embargo. Why did Cuba's biggest ally become the USSR and Moscow? Because of the embargo. Because of the embargo and the fact that America said, fuck you, we're going to kill you at any cost, the only other country powerful enough that was ignoring the US's sanctions, that had the ability to ignore the US's sanctions and do trade with Cuba anyway, was the USSR and its sphere of influence. So, the reason that Cuba cozied up to the USSR was they were very close allies with the States, and then the States tried to kill them. So they cozied up to the USSR. And yet, in a very circular logic, the US then said, the reason we are starving the Cubans is because they cozied up to the USSR. So, like, it is some of the most hypocritical circular shit you've ever seen, right? But, regardless of whether or not it was a real reason to do it, this was the justification that the US have been using publicly for the embargo for the longest time. The USSR is our enemy, the Cubans are allied with the USSR, that's why we're embargoing them. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in 92, right? Hello, Brook and friends, I'm ready for some education this morning. Hello, Cupins. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're doing some research right now, and then we're going to set up the presentation later, though I'm just quickly going over what I already have done, what I was doing at my mom's house this afternoon. So, in 92, when the Soviet Union collapses, so does this excuse for America, right? Because now, well, we can't say that we're embargoing the Cubans because they're allied with the USSR, because the USSR doesn't exist anymore, and in fact, its aid and support for Cuba have, like, severely decreased since their economy started, since the USSR started collapsing, right? Okay. But in reality, of course, they don't care about the fact that Cuba is allied with the USSR at all. They care about the fact that Cuba is not acting in the interests of American corporations. They don't even necessarily care about the fact that Cuba is communist, necessarily. It's more just, if Cuba was you know, a democratic capitalist country that was not playing ball with the US, they would also do this exact same shit. They care about the fact that Cuba does not align with American interests and that they nationalize companies and we're hurting American corporations. So, it's not like we can stop embargoing them now the USSR is gone. In fact, H.W. wanted, you know, he was planning on signing the Torricelli Act, which was planning to tighten the sanctions even more to, like, a crazy extent, but they just needed to come up with a new excuse. So, of course, they came up with the excuse that you might have heard many times before. Oh, the Cuban government is violating human rights, and that's why we're sanctioning them. Because we don't agree with their violation of the human rights of the citizens of Cuba, so we need to starve the citizens of Cuba to show how much we care about their human rights. If we just starve the citizens of Cuba, and violate their human rights by not allowing them access to food, water, medicine, or electricity, then we can defeat the Cuban government that is violating the human rights of the Cuban citizens. Okay. Not the greatest excuse, but like it worked, I guess. Hey, break, sorry to interrupt, but Gabagool beat Monarch and CEO. That's my fucking goat right there. I listen. Gabagool, that's the homie. I don't care. I could not talk about Grand Blue for years, and Gabagool will be the homie forever, okay? So, I mean, Lodiva beating not just Matera, but, like, Monarch in particular? I mean, you gotta... That's claps for the GOAT right there. But yeah, so, you know, weird excuse. Weird excuse, certainly, to say that, oh, the Cuban government is violating the human rights of the Cubans, so we have to violate the human rights of the Cubans even harder. It's, you know, reading Mein Kampf, but shaking my head the entire time so everyone knows I disagree with what's happening. It's like, we have to violate the human rights of the Cubans even harder to free them from their tyrannical government. Sure, okay, whatever. That's the excuse they went with. Now, interestingly, things had already kind of been getting worse for Cuba, even without the U.S. making things worse, because, again, in light of the sanctions, the global sanctions at this point, right? Again, it's not just that America is no longer trading with Cuba. They have very much made it so that almost any country in America's sphere of influence, which is almost the entire world at this point, excluding the USSR and its sphere of influence, they made it functionally impossible for those countries to trade with Cuba under threat of, you know, economic sanctions on them, like under literal gunpoint sometimes. Cuba is isolated from the entire world. The USSR was kind of their only savior here because the USSR was powerful enough and already opposed to America that they ignored American sanctions and American mandates to not trade with Cuba, and they gave them, you know, almost all 85% of Cuban trade was done with the USSR. So when the USSR, you know, loses the Cold War and collapses, that's really bad for Cuba. Because as the USSR's economy is falling apart, they trade less and less with Cuba, they buy less and less stuff with Cuba, they just have less money. You know what I mean? This leads to like some serious economic collapse in Cuba, even beyond what was already happening. Because now they literally have no one left to trade with. All the countries that have money are barred from trading with them by the US, and the only country that was able to doesn't have the money to engage with them anymore. They experienced a fall in wages larger than the Great Depression, right? The USSR was 85% of their trade because of the sanctions. The USSR basically stopped trading them entirely. Real wages declined by like 25%, and the Cuban deficit goes from 7% of their GDP to 320% of their GDP over 4 years. Right? A massive spike. There's so many other, every economic marker you can imagine for the health of the Cuban nation is basically like free falling in this time as the USSR kind of explodes, right? The Torricelli Act that the W wanted to sign was sort of intended to be like the final blow to the regime. Robert Torricelli, who wrote it, said that the Castro regime would be gone in a matter of weeks. So they were expecting, like, okay, this is like the final nail in the coffin. Things are already exploding for them with the USSR, like, collapsing. Their economy is even more in shambles than we could have ever imagined. We're going to blow them off the face of the earth with this one, right? So for some details about this act, Article 9 of the Torricelli Act, this long-ass, like, omnibus act set to just destroy the Cuban government, right? Prohibited any subsidiaries of any U.S. companies in any third country, you know, like France, Spain, whatever, any other, fucking Guatemala, whatever country, in any third country to trade with Cuba at all. 90% of the trade that was done here was food and medicine. So again, fully in opposition to the Geneva Convention, of course. And of course, these subsidiaries complied rapidly because, you know, the U.S. sort of keeps them alive, pays their bills, and they're U.S. subsidiaries, right? So they're not really going to fight this very hard. That ban on vessels that docked in Cuba not being able to dock in the U.S., that was instated with Kennedy and taken away with Carter, got reinstated. Of course, yeah, all this is against international law. And they also, any country that provided any kind of foreign aid to Cuba would get the aid that they, like, just directly. They set up a system automatically where any country that provided X amount of foreign aid to Cuba would immediately get that much foreign aid that the U.S. was providing penalized from them. You give Cuba $100 million and the U.S. was giving you $100 million in foreign aid? Okay, now you get zero. So again, even more arm twisting and coercion to make it so that nobody does anything with Cuba whatsoever. The Torricelli Act was also new, or at least the first thing in a while, where it actively took steps towards trying to overthrow the Castro government and lead to regime change, right? It prescribed a market economy and a return to capitalism for Cuba in the act, and it also provided like funding that the government could give out to internal opponents to the Castro government to aim for regime change and to overthrow the current Cuban government, right? A lot of these guys who accepted this funding from Washington did end up getting imprisoned in Cuba, and that was something that was used as like, look at them, they're imprisoning our allies, these like dictators, these things like that. But like, you know, in the Cuban government's defense, these are literally agents of a foreign enemy state that are actively working towards overthrowing your government. You know what I mean? You can take issue with the very concept of like, you know, a prison or something like that. But if there's any justified reason to throw people in prison, actively trying to like work with a foreign enemy territory that is trying to kill everyone in your fucking country to overthrow the government, it seems kind of reasonable to me, right? Furthest I got was Bill Clinton, who I'm not fully done with yet. But Bill Clinton made things even worse. In 1996, Clinton and his Congress passed the Helms-Burton Act, this is a very severe like escalation. And the reason this was passed is because there was a plane, not a plane. There's a plane belonging to this organization called the Brothers of Rescue that violated Cuban airspace and refused to turn back. And was dropping leaflets urging the Cuban populace to insurrection that was shot down by the Cuban government. And, you know, in response to this act of aggression, they approved this Helms-Burton Act, which was, like, pretty crazy, right? We'll talk about it in a second. I think this is his name, Jose Basulto. Maybe it's, I spelled his name wrong. It's possible there. His name is Chica Slim Shady. Oh, it's not a Z, it's an S. Jose Basulto, there you go. This Jose Basulto guy, who's the leader of this Brothers of Rescue organization, was, of course, trained by the CIA, right? So he's just an agent of the CIA, and he is has been involved in Cuban destabilization efforts since the 1960s when the embargoes first started and Castro first took over. And in 2005, he admitted to orchestrating a bazooka attack in Cuba in 1962 that killed 20 people. So again, it's not like this organization was some kind of like innocent organization that was aiming to like free the people of, again, this is just an organization created by the CIA for the express purpose of destabilizing the Cuban government and leading to regime change, right? So the Helms-Burton Act, you know, very severe escalation. All of the actions that have been taken by the U.S. government against Cuba so far, the sugar ban, the embargo, the like foreign, like, you know, all the pressure on like foreign countries, the ships docking in Cuba not being able to dock with the U.S., the retraction of foreign aid from any country that assisted Cuba, the banning of anyone who assisted Cuba from the U.S. aid program, the bans on subsidiaries of U.S. companies and third-party countries from being able to do trade with Cuba, everything that have been done up to this point was codified into U.S. law by this bill. It codified it into law. It was now part of, like, U.S. law that Cuba was to be treated this way. After it did this, it then also took away the president's ability to just executive action these changes away, making it something that only Congress could do. A lot of these changes have been done through executive actions by the presidents. It said everything up to now is law, and it can't be retracted unless it goes through Congress. They took away the president's ability to just roll these changes back as part of this act. So it really just wanted to, like, this is the point of no return, right? Like, where Carter previously, Carter could come in and he could start relaxing some of these sanctions. He could start rolling some of this shit back. Not anymore. Now it would be like trying to make like murder legal. Like it's a very significant like government action to try and change any of this shit. It would literally be changing U.S. law. And then it doesn't end there. There's this thing in the Helms-Burton Act called Title III, which sought to get even more extraterritorial with it and penalize these foreign companies that interact with Cuba even more. It allowed U.S. courts to prosecute foreign companies that took over any nationalized properties that, when they were nationalized, were held by a Cuban. So imagine being like a, German company or something like that, and, starting some kind of business agreement with Cuba. So some company or some person, some German guy, takes control of like some Cuban oil refinery or something like that. And starts like working there. You can now, like, that German can now, and his company can be prosecuted by a U.S. court under Title III. Why the fuck this is any of the US's business whatsoever? Who fucking knows? But that's what's in the act. Again, huge overreach. This actually isn't even legal in the US, funny enough, because the courts can only prosecute. Like, there's something about what was the exact detail on this? U.S. law is clear that prosecution in U.S. courts is possible only if a person aggrieved by the nationalization process was a U.S. citizen at the time of the expropriation, and that the expropriation took place in violation of public international law. Neither of those things are true in this case. It's not in accordance with wait, what? Yeah. It's not in accordance with international law, and it's not even in accordance with U.S. law. But Title III made it so that the U.S. could prosecute foreign companies that worked with Cuba, took any of their, any of the nationalized properties. Right? This is so far and away none of their fucking business that it's crazy. It is one of the greatest overreaches here ever. But it doesn't end there. This is the most backwards logic I've seen ever. Oh yeah, it doesn't end there. Foreign investors that had ever invested in Cuba, and I believe this worked retroactively to when this bill was passed, right? That had ever invested in Cuba could be prevented from operating on U.S. soil in any way, shape, or form. And this included international financial institutions. It banned the IMF and the World Bank from even giving loans to Cuba. Not foreign aid, right? Not gifts. Loans. They couldn't be creditors. They couldn't put Cuba in debt. They can't even debt trap them anymore. The IMF and the World Bank, like global international financial institutions. Again, this has nothing to do, this is none of the US's business. How did anyone approve this? I don't know, man. Now, I will say, I need to find out exactly when this was, but apparently Title III, so this the part that lets them prosecute foreign companies that do any business with Cuba, right? Title III was apparently suspended later, following extreme pressure and rejection from the EU and international bodies. They basically threatened to open a case with the World Trade Organization. Right? They threatened to open a case with the World Trade Organization, and the US backed down, not from the whole act, but just from this paragraph. In the modern day, the US cannot prosecute like an Italian, they cannot take an Italian company to court for doing business in Cuba. They can't do that anymore, but they could for a while. So yeah, what the fuck am I actually witnessing? Oh yeah, it's truly something, huh? This is as far as I've gotten. We're gonna continue from here. We have to finish off Bill Clinton's term. And then after Clinton, I think it's Clinton and then it's W, right? And then it's Obama after that, right? After W is Obama. So we're gonna go over all of this, and then we'll set up a presentation and we'll go through it at the end. And then that'll be the stream. This will always be the craziest example of the US acting like the kings of the world. Oh yeah, it's insane. The level of overreach, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It's the exact same thing as like what you always get taught in like World War II history about like appeasement with Hitler. How it's like, he took the Sudetenland, and everyone was like, surely he'll stop now if we just don't say anything, right? And then it's like, he took Czechoslovakia, then it was like, oh, you know, like, surely he'll stop now. Like, if we just don't say anything, we keep appeasing him, surely he'll stop. And he just kept reaching further and further and further until he, like, wanted everything. It's the exact same thing. The US started with their own trades. They said, we're not going to trade with Cuba. And then they were like, also, if anyone else trades with Cuba, we're going to penalize them. And then they were like, actually, if anyone else trades with Cuba at all, then we're not going to trade with them at all. And then it was like, well, if anyone trades with Cuba at all, we're going to cut off all foreign aid to them. And then it was like, well, if anyone trades with Cuba at all, we're going to put them in prison. It just, like, every time the US does some, like, insanely, like, entitled, controlling, fascistic shit, the US does, like, everyone else just kind of goes, okay, well, I mean, there's not really much you can do about it, so hopefully they stop, and then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, right? Meanwhile, screaming sovereignty whenever a country wants to nationalize their resources. Oh, yeah. The US is a big fan of sovereignty, for sure. Okay, so let's see. Where does this leave us? So right now, we got Title III of the Helms-Burton Act. So that's the part where you guys gotta come along on the ride with me. Let me, this is my Pathfinder, research tab. Don't worry about this. Let me look up Title 3 Helms-Burton Act suspension date. When did this actually get suspended? 2019? Wait, it ended? Helms-Burton Act was passed allowing U.S. nationals to sue persons or companies trafficking and expropriated property in Cuba. I also did the AI summary, but from 1996 through 2019, every U.S. president routinely renewed a suspension of Title III in 45-day or 6-month increments. Oh, I see. I see. Wait, what? Wait, no, it's backwards. Wait. Starting 2019, it's back in full force? Oh my god. Oh my god. What? It's back? Ah! I thought it was suspended. So from 1996 to 2019, US presidents were kind of routinely suspending it for limited amounts of time. But in Trump 1, he just said, no, it's back in full force forever. And then Biden kept it up. Oh my god. So in the modern day, the U.S. can prosecute companies that deal with any nationalized okay, so I have to rewrite this. It's like, what the fuck? Title III faced extreme rejection and pressure from the EU and other multinational organizations, leading to US presidents consistently signing temporary suspensions and waivers of it from 1996 to 2019. Trump ended this. My god, man. What the fuck? Really? Trump ended this. Ended these suspensions permanently in 2019, and it has not been suspended since. It is in full effect today. That can't be right. I need another source on that isn't the fucking... I need a source on that isn't the Google AI. There's... Title III creates a private cause of action and authorizes U.S. nationals with claims to confiscated property in Cuba to file suit in U.S. courts against persons that may be trafficking in that property. Someone just bombed the White House already? All right. The filing fee for Title III, yeah, set for U.S. courts at $6,000. A level that will discourage all but serious claims. Yeah, whatever you say, man. The Act grants President the authority to suspend the lawsuit provisions for up to 6 months. The United States will expedite. In 2019, President Trump allowed the suspension to expire, and Carnival Cruise was promptly sued under the... Oh my god. Yeah, no, it's real. In 2019, Trump stopped suspending it. What the fuck? The Helms-Burton Act was condemned by the Council of Europe, the European Union, Britain, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. Bro, do you know how bad your shit has to be to get condemned by Britain? Do you have any idea how fucking evil... Like, I probably because it hurts British interests, to be fair. British companies. Because, like, by the way, like, the thing that... like, if a British company takes over a Cuban nationalized property, that is helping Britain at Cuba's expense. Like, yes, it provides economic... Like, it provides economic trade and, like, activity for Cuba. But it is, like, you know... Like, that nationalized resource is now going to be controlled by the British instead of the Cubans. Like, it's not even that good for Cuba. Like, it's a more beneficial exchange for Britain. But, like, you know, if Cuba's desperate, they might do that to, like, get some kind of trade or, like, cash injection in there. And even that they can't have. That is... My god. After a complaint by the EU with the World Trade Organization, a dispute settlement panel was established. Later, the work of the panel was suspended to find a solution through negotiations. After a year, the panel lost its jurisdiction over the matter, and the EU did not pursue the matter any further before the World Trade Organization. The US is just fucking above the law. It's above any kind of international law. You can't even threaten them with anything. Like, even if you go, like, they are the highest fucking authority in the land, man. Condemned by colonialism incarnate is diabolical? Yes. The US is the highest authority in the land. There is no international, multinational organization that can, like, punish them for anything. They control the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, like, who cares? My God, man. Cool. That's really fun. This book was written in 2013. Yo, what's going on, Quacksir? This book was written in 2013. So at the time of 2013, Title III was, like, basically suspended on and off for the majority of the time between, like, you know, the 2000 and 2019 or whatever. Or 2013 when this book was written. This book did not live to see Trump just go, no, fuck it. This shit's gonna be real forever now. Oh, that's really fun. Okay, cool. I'm sorry, what? It keeps getting worse, guys. What? The Helms-Burton Act decided, among other things, future school curricula, providing that foreign instructors teach Cuban history to pupils and students. Aware of their popularity, the act prohibits the candidacy of both Fidel and Raul Castro in any future elections. This act is literally prescribing how, like, the Cuban education system and who's allowed to run for office in Cuba. Does this sound like sovereignty to you? They're literally saying Fidel and Raul Castro cannot run for office in Cuba. How the fuck does the US get to say that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? I don't even know what to write down for this. The act prescribed what Cuba's school system should be and teach about Cuban history. The only way to stop the US now is World War III. I mean, the US is doing a pretty good job of ripping itself apart currently, but it's gonna get worse before it gets better. Dying empires rarely peacefully let go of power. The US has kind of been their own biggest enemy for the past, like, you know, 12 years or whatever. And called for the ban of Fidel and Raul Castro's candidacy for any future elections. Yeah, for any future elections. Slightly off topic, I want to glaze Cuba for a sec. I'm South African born, and the things Cuba has done for us in terms of health and ending our apartheid, even in their situation, is legendary. Yes, man. Yes, very good. One of the biggest brain breakers for me ever is I'm, like, learning about the extent to which the US has tried to just destroy Cuba economically, and then learning that not only has Cuba, you know, held on and fought these sanctions for 64 years, not only, to my understanding, has the Cuban government not revolted against and attempted to remove the Communist Party that's in charge, because I guess they are just that popular, right? But also, Cuba, for some reason, sends more doctors to, like, for foreign aid to countries than every other member, every member, because Cuba's not a member of the G7, every member of the G7 combined? Cuba apparently is so medically advanced that US CEOs break the embargo to secretly sneak into Cuba and steal medical secrets to make new pharmaceutical drugs? How? How is a country that has entirely been cut off from any sort of economic prosperity for the last 64 years, how are they still running circles around the richest country in the world in terms of healthcare? If there has ever been proof that one of these systems is a lot better than the other, I don't know how much better it could get. I promise you, if the US had these kind of this level, of course this would never happen because the US runs the world, but if the US had this level of sanctions put upon them for, fuck, not 64 years, 64 months, the country would crumble. And it's a much larger, much richer country than Cuba. I have no idea how the fuck they did this shit. How is that country still there, man? Like, how is it still there? And how is it relatively this good at the shit that is, yeah, and education, yes. Like, obviously, Cuba's obviously struggling. There's, you know, like, there's food shortages, power shortages, water shortages, medicine shortages, everything shortages. But, like, fucking duh, that is not a sign that their, like, economy, like, their system has failed. Their economy is failing because they have been completely and utterly cut off from any trade with almost anybody in the entire fucking world. There is no country that survives under those conditions. There is no country that does as well as Cuba is doing under these conditions. The fucking US does not. They deserve a lot of glaze. Absolutely. It's still horrible what's happening to them. And, like, they are still on a timer. Even if that timer is apparently really fucking long. The US keeps closing the noose tighter and tighter and tighter with every administration. So things are only getting worse and worse and worse. And, like, the rate of change of how quickly Cuba is starving is increasing as they make the sanctions worse and worse and worse and worse over time. So it's not like Cuba is, like, this invincible, pedestalized, like, perfect nation that can survive forever. But it's been 64 years. That is... Now, if there's any... Whatever Cuba is doing, if it's fucking communism, socialism, anarchy, whatever the fuck the Cuban system is, has got to be the superior system. How is that country not a crater in the ground by now? It doesn't make sense. It literally does not make sense. How the fuck does Cuba have anything to spare to help others? Cuba would look like Wakanda if the US wasn't comically evil? Yes, man. Like, they're already mogging the richest, most powerful, most advanced country on earth in healthcare and education, as they currently are. Like, genuinely, I'm starting to think that the only reason that we don't have, like, fucking flying cars and teleportation and, like, spaceships that can travel the speed of light and all this bullshit that the science fiction movies told us we would have, like, you know, in, like, 1960 when someone writes some science fiction shit and it's, like, set in, like, 2024 and there's, like, flying cars and teleporters. I'm starting to think the only reason that's not true is because capitalism won the Cold War. Because these fucking communists are making magic. They're, like, casting spells. I don't know what they're doing. Cuba is casting spells. Castro or somebody in his fucking government, I mean, Castro's dead at this point, right? But, like, somebody in the fucking Castro government is literally just a level 20 wizard from D&D. Like, someone is casting Wish. The math is not mathing that this country is still alive. Someone has, like, the ability to cast Create Water and Create Food or something, like, I don't know. It does not make sense. The more I learn about these sanctions, the more I'm like, how is anyone alive? How is literally anyone alive? Now, you know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions? I don't know. Hundreds of thousands have died. But how is anyone alive? Right? To be fair, America got out of the World Health thing, and immediately on Twitter, every other country found something against cancer. Felt like they cured it low-key. America's just getting it everyone's way, yeah. Cubans moving like Elder Scrolls Dwemer? Dude, genuinely, I don't understand it. I do not understand it at all. How the fuck is that country not a burning hole in the ground? How is that country not a smoking pair of shoes right now? The most influential country, the most powerful empire in the history of the human race. The most powerful and influential empire in the history of the human race has been doing everything short of literally nuking the island to destroy Cuba for 64 years, and it has failed. How? How is that fucking island not a smoking pair of shoes? If we had a successful communist society for 10 years, I feel like things would be drastically different. It's like, I don't even understand communism as an economic system, right? I'm not even here to defend communism from like an academic, theoretical perspective. All I'm saying is there's a communist country here that has been literally getting bombarded and starved for 64 years that is still somehow outperforming the most successful capitalist country in human history on multiple fronts. How? I literally could not explain, I could not define communism for you. But all I know is that Cuba is a communist country. I know this because that's why the Americans hate it so much. And I know that Cuba is actively mogging the U.S. on healthcare and education. Just with those two, and I know that the U.S. has been starving that country and has had both hands fully curled around its neck, squeezing as hard as it fucking can, trying to kill it for 64 years. 64 years. Most of your parents were not alive when the embargo started. It's not older than you. It's older than your parents. Like, how? So just from those 3 data points, I'm like, communist society sounds pretty good. I don't know. Just to be clear, technically, communist countries oxymoronic. Communism is not allowed for a state. Fair. I guess Cuba's probably more socialist, because Cuba has a state and a government. Like, yeah, I think I do know that. That's true. I guess Cuba is technically probably a socialist state, because they have, like, a state and, like, a government and, like, leaders. So I guess, yeah, Cuba's probably not communist, right? I suppose, in, like, the academic definition of the word, it's probably more of a socialist country. That is fair. Like, that's what I'm saying. I do not claim at all to understand what communism is or to be able to create a coherent argument for why it's good or bad. I'm ignorant. I'm not going to pretend I'm anything but that. But with just those 3 data points, I feel like I don't really need to know much more, right? Socialists, communist, stuff like that. I guess socialist country. Socialist country, right? But like heavily socialist country, like, you know, almost entirely like nationalized corporations, and like a lot of things are like not, like, very little capitalism allowed, right? Socialist country, squeezed drastically by the US for 64 years, outperforming the most powerful and successful capitalist country in human history, in both education and healthcare, consistently, in the situation they're in. I feel like with just those 3 data points, I'm like, well, one of these systems sure seems a lot better than the other, no? I don't know. It's pretty, my grandma wasn't even in high school 64 years ago. Yeah, if you're young enough, this might be older than your grandparents. Like, if you're like 15, this shit might be older than your grandparents, bro. Depends. It's been going on for so long. But if Cuba could thrive in an equal format for like 20 years, it'll become Wakanda. I don't fucking know, man. It feels like that. Like, obviously, I can't say that with any amount of authority, but like, it sure feels like that. It sure fucking feels like that. What would have happened if this country was allowed to thrive? You know? And like, I don't think that I'm particularly ready to like deify Castro, or like, I don't think that like Cuba is like uniquely positioned. Oh, like Cuba just had like the greatest leaders in the world. I don't really know. You know, seems like a, like, you know, Castro and like Che Guevara, they seem like cool people, but I don't know if it's like, oh, it's just these great men that are, I think it's just the system is really good. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like maybe any country that adopted these socialist policies and was allowed to, you know, exist without being immediately stomped on by the boots of the United States might become Wakanda in 20 years. Genuinely? Yeah. Anyway, let's keep reading here. So they said, we're gonna prescribe your school system for you and what it can teach about Cuban history, and we're gonna say that Fidel and Raul Castro are banned from any future elections. It also defines the nature of a future democratic government in Cuba. It'll be a government in which the... Bro, how... Man, get rid of the whole country. The Helms-Burton Act defines the nature of a future democratic government in Cuba. This will be a, and I quote, a government in which the President of the United States will judge whether it meets the requirements established in Section 206. Section 206 has no mention of human rights, freedom of expression, multi-party systems. Section 206 stipulates that the government must have, quote, made significant progress in returning to U.S. citizens and entities which are 50% or more beneficially owned by U.S. citizens property taken by the Cuban government on January 1st, 1959 or thereafter. If it wasn't already incredibly obvious what the US government considers an acceptable government, their democratic government, as defined by them, that, you know, if Cuba agreed to this, like, this is what they would be submitting to, the US would determine whether or not they were being democratic enough. And being democratic means returning the properties you nationalized to the US. That's what it means to be a good democracy in the US's eyes. Not freedom of speech, freedom of expression, human rights, fuck, elections, right? No. Democracy is when you give America its money back, and the more money you give America, the democracier it is. This feels like someone is making this up. What do you mean? How could that possibly be the case? I think we need Sun Wukong at this point? Yeah, bro. Maybe because Cuban system actually allows for growth and change. Meanwhile, capitalism is stagnation, final boss. Yeah, man. What do I even write here for these notes? It's like, the act also defined what the democratic, what a democratic government in Cuba should look like. It stipulated that it would be a government in which the president of the US will judge whether or not, whether it meets the requirements established in Section 206. Section 206 mentioned nothing about human rights, freedom of expression, elections, etc. Instead, Section 206 stated that the government would have to have made significant progress in returning to U.S. citizens and entities which are beneficially owned, which are more than 50%, beneficially owned by U.S. citizens, property taken by the Cuban government on Jan 1st, 1959 or thereafter. Basically, it only cared about the government returning the nationalized properties to Cuba, and that's what makes, or to America, to the US, the nationalized properties to the US, and that's what makes a good democracy, apparently. I don't even know, it feels, okay, cool, awesome. What next, man? There's so much shit to go. I don't even know if we'll get to the presentation today. As in the Torricelli Act, the Helms-Burton Act, through Article 109, allocated a budget to finance internal opposition, revealing publicly for the first time a policy that had long been hidden. The act also allocated funding for internal opposition to the Castro government, like the Torricelli Act, but it was public about it this time. Yay, shamelessness. On October 21st, 98, an amendment was made to Reagan's Omnibus Budget Reconciliation... Oh, no, not this is not Reagan's. To the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. Since that date, Section 211 has prevented, for example, the French company Pernod Ricard to market the Havana Club brand of rum in the United States, and allows the multinational Bacardi to usurp its commercial rights. What does this mean? Change only happens under capitalism when people can make money off of it? Right. Wait, I don't understand. It prevented, for example, the French company Pernod Ricard to market the Havana Club brand of rum in the US, and allows the multinational Bacardi to usurp its commercial rights. This amendment violates, among other things, the WTO's agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, and such basic principles of WTO as the national treatment and the most favored nation treatment. I'm not sure what this means. I guess, like, if you have any kind of Cuban-related branding in your products, even if you are a third country, like you're French, then a US multinational company could just usurp your rights within the country to market that shit. And they could, like, sell it as their own product? Is that real? That can't be real. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It prevented, for example, the French company Pernod Ricard to market the Havana Club brand of rum in the United States, and allowed the multinational Bacardi to usurp its commercial rights. Yeah, I guess. What? The act also allowed U.S. multinationals to usurp the commercial rights of any foreign company marketing a product with Cuban-related branding in the States. Sure, I guess. The reason forms of bigotry like racism and misogyny lasted for so long is because people, and still last, because people basically created a system where empathy and acceptance simply could not happen. Yes. Who was it? Was it Charlie Kirk who was like, empathy is a weakness or something like that? Like, empathy is a weakness in the human race or some shit? Counting or not counting gang violence, looking ass. What does this mean? I feel like I need to understand this a little better. Helms-Burton Act. Helms-Burton Act. Havana Club. Havana Club rum, Bacardi, Pernod Ricard. Do not commit the sin of empathy, for real. The long-running legal battle over the Havana Club rum trademark involves a fierce multi-decade dispute between the French spirit company Pernod Ricard, partner with the Cuban government, and Bacardi, heavily intertwined with the U.S. trade embargo and the Helms-Burton Act. Pernod Ricard sells authentic Cuban-made Havana Club worldwide, making it a top global brand, though it is entirely barred from the U.S. market due to trade embargo. Rights acquisition. Bacardi purchased the recipe brand rights and remaining claims from the exiled Arecabala family in the 90s. Bacardi began producing and selling its own version of Havana Club distilled in Puerto Rico and marketed specifically within... Oh, okay. So they can just straight up violate intellectual property if your intellectual property has anything to do with a business partnership with Cuba. That's what that means. I see. What? What? Bacardi was able to just make and sell its own rum called Havana Club? Honestly, that Kirk quote was taken heavily out of context. Like, yeah, sure, but also I don't really doubt that he would have had like a similar, like he would have disagreed with it that much, right? It is like kind of core to a lot of the conservative viewpoint that like you can't really be too empathetic because then you have to realize all the horrible shit that we're doing to people and you got to think about why we're doing that. You know what I mean? Empathy is a little bit antithetical to like maintaining the status quo, because the status quo involves suffering for a lot of people, and you have to just kind of be okay with that being a fact of life to be able to hold that viewpoint, right? Like, maybe that Kirk quote was taken heavily out of context. I believe that, but I also don't know that it really is like I don't know that it like the reality of the matter will be that much better, honestly. Even if he didn't say it out loud, the ideology is pretty juxtaposed with, like, any real amount of empathy anyway. Some people are just going to be poor and homeless, and some of those people are going to die, and some of those people are going to work in sweatshops and be exploited globally, and some of those kids are going, and some of those people are going to be kids, and some of those kids are going to die, and that's just the way the world is, and isn't that sad? And thoughts and prayers. You know? Let's not actually change the system to, like, try and do anything about that. It's, you know, just the way there's people who are on top and there's people who are on the bottom, and that's just kind of how it's going to be forever. It's a meritocracy. Those people probably have something wrong with them anyway. Okay, well, that's cool. basically, if your product involved some kind of business partnership with Cuba, that's not how you spell partnership. Partnership with Cuba, like Havana Club Rum, the US would just let US multinationals violate your IP and just copy the product and sell it in the US without giving a damn. That's fun. Okay. Fucking what next? How could this possibly get worse? Oh, wow. Beginning in 1999, the Clinton administration decided to relax certain penalties and expand the class of persons authorized to send and receive money transfers in Cuba. How generous of you after all of this shit. Right? Again, what has the Clinton government done so far? Right? They funded someone who's actively working to create an organization to destabilize Cuba, but that's just normal. Which is, this guy's actively like killed people in Cuba. They codified into law everything the U.S. government had done and removed the president's ability to roll it back. They let foreign companies get sued for working with Cuba. They banned the IMF and World Bank from being creditors to Cuba. They prescribed what the government of Cuba should be, what its education system should be, what it should teach, and they called for the ban of Fidel and Raul Castro from any future Cuban elections. Yeah, they were public about funding opposition to the government, and they allowed people to just get their intellectual property rights, like third-party companies, to get their intellectual property rights violated as long as it had some kind of Cuban branding in it. But let's relax the restrictions a little bit. We're feeling generous. Go fuck yourself, man. Actually burn in hell. The Clinton administration decided to relax certain penalties and expand the class of persons authorized to send and receive money transfers. Similarly, the number of U.S. and Cuban airports allowed to maintain direct links between the two nations can now include cities other than Miami and Havana. Academic, scientific, cultural, and sports exchanges were also allowed between the two countries, even those that had not previously been restricted. What? We're also allowed, even those that had not previously been restricted. Okay, well, yeah, duh. Washington also began to allow the sale of food and agricultural products to private entities. Wow, they finally they unviolated part of the Geneva Convention. Good job. Wowie, wowie. In 99, the Clinton administration relaxed certain restrictions on money transfers and cultural academic exchange between the two countries and allowed the sale of food to private entities. Wowie. The U.S. basically treating Cuba like the deadliest virus imaginable because communism? Yeah, it is funny now to learn that I guess academic, like, I don't know if Cuba even is communism technically, but, you know, sure, I guess. I mean, the U.S. is very consistent. They don't care if you're a communist. They don't care if you're a Democrat, like a democratic like nation. They don't like a more modern like liberal nation. They don't care if you are a fascist or a literal Nazi. If you are working against American interests, they will try and kill you. And if you are not, they are chill with you. We literally saw this with the Nazis, right? The US's problem with the Nazis was not Nazism and fascism. It was the fact that the Nazis were an enemy of the US. As soon as, you know, Nazi Germany had lost, and some of those Nazis were willing to work with the US, they started exchanging notes on how best to torture people. There is no fundamental opposition to the Nazis and the concept of being a Nazi or being a fascist. It's just that the Nazis wanted to take over the world from America. That was kind of the main issue, wasn't it? If the Nazis were willing to work with America from day dot, I don't think they would ever have had any issue with it. In fact, I know they wouldn't have had any issue with it because they have been very consistent on this matter. Because literally, as soon as some Nazis were willing to work with the States, they didn't care at all. I mean, it's not even a theory. It's proven. So it's like, whether, like, they don't really care what your system of government is. They literally, I mean, it could not be clearer, right? It could not be clearer. The US is in their own fucking bill that they wrote. Their definition of a democratic government is one that gives US corporations their property back in Cuba. It's a joke. That's what it means to be democratic to them, is to give us our money. They wrote that fucking bill. Like, could it be any more clear-cut? Title 3 was applied to non-European nations. Yeah. Similarly, on August 25th, 2000, the State Department, in violation of its obligations to the host country, refused to grant a visa to Ricardo Alarcón de Quesada. Alarcón, maybe? Alarcón de Quesada? President of the Cuban Parliament, who wished to attend the Conference of Presiding Officers of National Parliaments of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Oh, that's fun. Cool. Refused to give a visa to a Cuban, to a Cuban diplomat for a meeting of, for an international parliamentary meeting that they were hosting, that the US was hosting in opposition to their obligations to invited countries. I thought people weren't white until the government was afraid of them siding with the slaves. Yeah. Fascism doesn't have values or beliefs or anything. It just has an us, and whoever isn't us is the enemy. I mean, it's even more, it's just like, us is people who serve American capital interests, specifically. Like, the definition of us is, do you serve American capital? Not even the interest of the American people. Do you serve American capital interests? If you do, I don't give a fuck what you're doing. Literally, we just read about this at Operation Condor. You could be putting 20% of your population in jail and putting them in the grill. You could be the worst dictator anyone has ever fucking seen and a true blue fascist. If you are making the US money, we love you. You could be the most heart of gold popular leader in your country that everyone loves. They want to be in charge forever. If you are not serving American interests, we are going to kill you and replace you with someone who will. It is really just that clear-cut. Any idea that the US cares at all about whether a government is, like, violating the rights of its people, and, like, that's why they intervene and shit, is, like, it's a dog whistle at this. It's either a dog whistle or you're uneducated. It's actually crazy. Alright, what is this? The Trade Sanctions Reform and Export Enhancement Act. Oh? Could this be some relaxation on this bullshit? In October 2000, following the passage of several devastating hurricanes across Cuba and pressure from U.S. I'm so tired, boss. Boss, I'm so tired. In October 2000, following the passage of several devastating hurricanes across Cuba and under pressure from the U.S. agricultural lobby in search of markets for surplus production, Congress decided to adopt the Trade Sanctions Reform and Export Enhancement Act. It allowed for the sale of food commodities to Cuba for humanitarian reasons. When the U.S. finally decided to relax some of these sanctions and allow themselves to actually, sell more food to Cuba, why did they do it? Because it served capital interests of American agricultural companies. American agricultural companies lobbied the U.S. government, saying that with Cuba having hit by these hurricanes, they are a perfect market, and we can sell them so much food at really high prices, probably. Right? Even when they finally do the more humanitarian thing, quote unquote, right? It's because it was the companies wanted them to do it. Right now, there are okay people serving American capital interests for the us, that is the cishet white men, that isn't necessary. The us isn't people serving American interests? Oh, sure, that's fair. Yes. They will use people. You're like, I see what you mean. Yes. The us are just okay with them for now until they run out of bottom rung people. Yeah, you're right. Like, it's not like they actually, like, you know, care for or ally with the one serving their interest. It's just more about who they will and won't kill, right? Yeah, fair enough. The us is an even smaller in-group. I understand what you mean. I'm just saying that, like, who the US is okay with, like, allying with temporarily and using and, like, not being hostile towards, the only thing they care about is whether or not you serve their interests. They don't care at all, in fact, about whether you are treating your people well or upholding their ideology or anything like that, as long as they can make money off of you. But you're right, yes. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, but I see it's an important distinction, and I see your point. You are correct. Oh my god. Okay. What do I even do with this? Glad to see I came back at peak capitalism. Yep. I'm tired, boss. What do I even, like, this is so cynical, man. In October 2000, Congress adopted the Trade Sanctions Reform and Export Enhancement Act, which allowed the sale of food resources to Cuba for humanitarian reasons. Because U.S. agricultural companies thought that Cuba was a valuable, untapped market following a series of severe hurricanes sweeping the nation. Again, banning the sale or the free movement of food and medicine to a country is a violation of the Geneva Convention that the US signed. Even during times of out-and-out war, boots-on-the-ground war, that is still a violation of the Geneva Convention. The US was gladly doing it and has been for 40 years. Why did they unviolate the Geneva Convention? Because US companies thought they could make a lot of money. US agricultural companies thought they could make a lot of money off the famine in Cuba. If that's not some of the most evil shit, it's like, oh, yo, they just got hit by several severe hurricanes and they were already in an incredibly economically vulnerable state. We could, like, probably sell them, like, fucking wheat or whatever the fuck. We could sell them corn at, like, a 10,000% markup. And, like, what are they gonna do? Not eat? Bro, you gotta relax these sanctions. I could make so much fucking money right now. They literally have none food. Bro, can you imagine the fucking markup I can sell them these bananas at? Oh my god, man. The agricultural lobby saw a bunch of people, they starved, suffering even more from Mother Nature, and was like, profit? Yeah, like, it hit a tipping point where they're like, wait a minute, I think I could sell these people at I think I could sell them this food at whatever fucking price I want, and they will be forced to buy it, because they literally are out of food. We had already starved them to the brink of exhaustion, and now they've been hit by severe natural disasters. Dude, there's so much money to be made here. That's why, that, and only that, is why the US decides to unviolate the Geneva Convention. I want to cry. Okay, cool. Since 2002, the United States has become the main supplier of agricultural products to Cuba, and 38 of its 50 states have signed trade agreements with the island. Wow, yeah, whoa. Nevertheless, Washington imposes restrictive conditions on Cuba, demanding, for example, full payment in advance in a currency other than the dollar. In addition, it requires that financial transactions be conducted through a bank in a third country. Thus, according to a report of the U.S. International Trade Commission published in June of 2009 entitled U.S. Agricultural Sales to Cuba, Certain Economic Effects of U.S. Restrictions, bureaucratic obstacles imposed by the Department of Treasury have substantially limited bilateral trade. Lifting sanctions on agricultural products would lead to an increase of sales of $1.2 billion, up by 64% compared to current sales. Okay, so, of course, even when they did that, they still imposed heavy restrictions and bureaucracy on Cuba to receive this food, stipulating full payment in advance in a currency other than the dollar, and that the transactions be handled by a bank from a third country. You're gonna have to work to not starve. To not starve, lil fella. You're gonna have to work real hard for it to not starve, lil fella. All this, we haven't even gotten to the U.S. bombing fishermen on the chance they could be helping Cuba? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, man, what are we even doing? Oh, okay. Everyone's favorite. W. George W. It's time for the mission accomplished administration. It's time for the shoe dodging administration. It's time for the Iraq and the nuclear administration. It's time for the watch this drive administration. I'm sure things will get better here, right? In January 2001, Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State under the Clinton administration, expressed her wish that the newly elected W might be the president destined to end the Cuban regime. Cool. Okay, so we're starting off strong. She thereby illustrated clearly the overall community of interest that existed between Republicans and Democrats vis-a-vis Cuba. Yeah, because the Clintons were, Democrats, and the Bush administration is obviously Republicans. But again, American imperialism and the interests of capital have always been bipartisan. Operation Condor, bipartisan. Israel, bipartisan. Korea, bipartisan. Cuba, bipartisan. Vietnam, bipartisan. American imperialism, neocolonialism, and the interests in capital are not a matter of Democrat or Republican. They are the very foundations the country is founded on, and both parties love them. Whether it's the Democrats with Clinton or the Republicans with Bush or whatever fancy name you want to put on it, they all love starving and killing brown people. Or just really anyone who isn't in service of American capital interests. Republicans and Democrats shake hands on starving Cubans. Madeleine Albright, very excited that Bush might... I'll say Democrat Madeleine Albright, very excited that Republican Bush might finally end the Cuban regime. Cool, man. Cool, awesome. Cool, fun, awesome. Awesome, cool, fun. And Bush spared no efforts to accomplish this task. Oh, awesome. Indeed, Bush has been the most belligerent White House resident since Ronald Reagan. Oh, cool, fun, awesome. I don't know. It really seems like all of them have been incredibly belligerent. Like, would I say that Reagan was more belligerent than HW or Clinton? It's really hard to say. Like, I'm not saying he wasn't, but I really don't know which one of them is the least belligerent. It all seems like just a cavalcade of human rights violations, left and right and center. In February of 2002, the State Department refused to grant visas to nearly 60 Cuban officials of the state enterprise Alimport, who have been invited to the U.S. by agriculture producers interested in trading with Cuba. Your companies invited them to the U.S. to exploit their famine for their profit, and you still didn't give them a visa. Oh, what are we doing here? I don't even write this down. Like, I'm so like satiated by evil that I don't even know what counts as important enough to put in the presentation anymore. How the hell did America get powerful enough to do all this bullshit with zero consequences? The world wars were very helpful. Being an ocean away from any other country that had power for a long time, and therefore being able to like just isolate and build up in silence over like the 1800s was very helpful. And then the world wars really was like the right place at the right time, right? all of Europe getting devastated, leaving America as like the only real powerful country in the vacuum. Very, very, like, you know, it was kind of right place, right time, at least for them. It's kind of like how Britain was always, you know how like Britain was like an island? And it was really hard for anyone to invade or otherwise intervene in British bullshit because they were just separated from the rest of Europe by water. America has that on steroids. America is separated from, you know, at the time when America would have been gathering its power, all of the other powerful countries on Earth, the Spanish, the British, the French, whoever, were all separated by the Atlantic Ocean. If there was any, you know, if and when there were points where these countries were more powerful than America, it was actually kind of difficult for them to interfere and fuck with them, right? So, like, they were just kind of, you know, geographically, they were kind of, they had no predators, like, natural predators in their region. And, like, anyone who could have fucked with them was an ocean away and had more important things to worry about until it was too late. Until World War II, World War I and II happened back to back, decimated Europe, and left America as the strongest country in the world. Anyway, refused to provide visas for 60 Cuban officials that American agriculture companies invited to the US to discuss trade. Insult to injury, I guess? Get trolled? Cool. Similarly, the Bush administration severely restricted academic, scientific, cultural, and sports exchanges. Oh, you know the one fucking thing that Clinton had done? The one fucking thing that Clinton had relaxed after doing so many extremely draconian things to Cuba? The one fucking thing that Clinton had done? Relax restrictions on money transfers and cultural academic exchange between the two countries? The one tiny, in the grand scheme of things, insignificant improvement Clinton had made to the situation, Bush was like, can't have that. Restricted academic and cultural exchange between the two countries, rolling back the only minuscule, tiny, unimportant in the grand scheme of things good thing that Clinton had done all administration. Yay. And China is too busy minding their own business to want to overtake the US in the global market. I think China is watching the US tear itself apart and positioning itself to take over, right? I think China is already overtaking. I don't know if China's minding their own business, right? China is already overtaking the US in the global market. China is now, not only is China now the primary trading partner of more countries than the US is, like at this point in time, China is the primary trading partner of more countries than the US, but also China is the primary trading partner of more countries than the US has ever been. Even at their peak of global trade dominance, the US was never the primary trading partner of as many countries as China is now. The US is absolutely currently being overtaken, or maybe even you could say in the past tense, has been overtaken by China in the global market. They're just kind of doing it silently and letting, you know, like all the previous US presidents for the past like fucking 20 years silently rip the country apart as they've been growing, right? They're kind of doing what the US did to like Britain, right? Where the US was like slowly, you know, in its own little corner of the world, gathering all its power, consolidating its regional power, right? This is just what the US did when they were like, you know, consolidating its regional power, asserting regional dominance, getting ready as these other empires collapse. That's what America did with Britain, and that's now what China's doing with the US. They are just sitting, like, for the longest time now, they have been sitting in their own region, becoming a regional superpower, controlling everything in their region, gathering their power, and watching America die. When China takes over as an empire, I wouldn't be surprised if China is just as comically evil. Me neither. I don't know enough about China to say, but the things I do know are not very good in terms of like the Uyghurs and shit like that, right? So like, I don't think that there is, I don't think that there, you know, I don't think that you can be an empire and not be comically evil. Like, empire and imperialism sort of necessitates the whole comically evil thing. Maybe China isn't going to do that. Maybe China is just going to be okay with being a regional superpower and is not going to engage in the extent of global imperialism and dominance the US wanted to do. But, yeah, I don't know enough about the country, and I would just doubt it. I'm not going to say anything with any kind of authority, but I'll be very surprised if China is just this glorious, you know, beautiful savior that is amazing and perfect. Better than America? Maybe, but that's a very, very, very low bar. I don't know, bro. Was the British Empire better than America? I don't know. Probably not. America, with modern technology, America has been able to be more omnipresent and globally dominant. But man, you really do have to hand it to the British. They were able to cause so much suffering, destruction, and genocide worldwide with, like, ships that have to travel with sails. The amount of, like, dedication to the game. How do you kill hundreds of millions of people without airplanes? It's really, like, I don't know if the US has outdone the British, man. It really is tough. Right? Like, how are you, like, because you gotta adjust for inflation, right? Like, maybe the British Empire wasn't able to be as constantly and globally omnipresent, but you gotta adjust for, like, you know, fascistic inflation. They did that shit with boats that traveled with sails. If you wanted to, like, let, you know, a British governor in India know that he had to start killing anyone whose skin was darker than a certain shade, you had to, like, send that message to him. It would take months to get there. You had to send it by boat. You really, like, it's a level of dedication to the evil. You know what I mean? That I don't know if the US has managed to outdo their dad. I don't know. They're both horrible for sure. But, like, I think adjusted for inflation, you gotta imagine the British Empire is somehow even more evil than the American Empire, right? It's hard to say. But it's like, you know, fucking, they just love doing it. It's true. It's, like, impressive in the way that, like, a tornado is impressive. You know? Tony Stark built that fucking suit in a cave with a box of scraps. The British created racism in a cave with a box of scraps. Yeah, misogyny and homophobia are age-old. The British did invent racism, though. America does not have that. America does not have that under their belt. The British literally invented race and racism. I mean, you gotta... How can you top that? I don't know if America can top that. It's hard. Misogyny is as old as patriarchy, and patriarchy is like basically as old as, like, at the very least, European civilization. Maybe even more ancient civilization. Yeah, the Sumerians, that's true. But they did, like, kind of invent racism, which is... It is crazy. America did restructure racism quite a bit. Oh, America, I think, like, you know, they perfected all the things their granddad created, but it is a different thing to be the guy who made it. Like, that is a different level of evil aura, you know? The US kind of perfected it. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. You know, it's hard. It really is like a MJ LeBron kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, the British did things that no one had ever seen done before. But, like, the US has kind of been doing, like, the US just kind of did it maybe better and, like, maybe more extremely and maybe for longer. I don't know about longer, but Portal 1 is more culturally significant than Portal 2. Yeah, it's hard to say, you know? Britain literally invented all forms of racial discrimination. Oh, yeah. The point is they're both horrible, but yeah, you know, there is something about the British feels even more evil. You know? Just because it's easier. America had it easier than Britain did. It feels like Britain had to work for their evil way harder. It's like a different level of dedication. America is kind of like the spoiled brat of being like a evil imperialist empire that is like so comically like mustache twirlingly evil. Yeah, PUBG and Fortnite, exactly. Fortnite had a greater global impact and maybe even more staying power, though honestly no, the British Empire looks like it's going to outlive the American Empire, right? But like, you know, Fortnite had like a greater cultural impact and was probably more popular at its peak, but like PUBG invented the genre. So it's like, if you had to say which one of them was the more influential battle royale shooter, like it really is kind of it's up to personal preference, right? America perfected racism and imperialism, but the British like sort of fucking created it. Yeah, like the British, yeah, blood, sweat, and tears into that shit. Minecraft, Hunger Games, yes. Nobody jumps for the beef. All right, we gotta go. All right, what are we doing, man? W. Yeah, he rolled back the only good thing Clinton ever done. Friendly reminder, there are still lots of British colonies. Oh yeah, for sure. It's not like the British Empire is like, you know, British Empire is over party, but like certainly the American Empire is now like they are what the British used to be. They are the biggest, most dominant empire, right? All right, what are we doing here? He rolled back all the shit that Clinton did. Well, the only good thing that Clinton did. The Bush administration banned Cuban scientists from publishing articles in U.S. journals. Awesome. In February 2004, Washington banned Ibrahim Ferrer, the famous Cuban singer featured in the album The Buena Vista Social Club, then 77 years old, and 4 other artists from traveling to the U.S. to receive the Grammys they had won. Oh my god, man. Banned Ibrahim Ferrer and 4 other Cuban artists from traveling to the States to collect the Grammys the U.S. decided they won. That's remarkably petty, yeah. Like, it's a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but it's just like, really? You can't let them get the Grammy? You can't let them just go pick it up and go home immediately? God, man, it's disgusting. Their visit would be detrimental to U.S. interests. Because their visit would have been detrimental to U.S. interests. Apparently. Okay, man. Noob U.S. bigotry versus pro-British bigotry? I don't know if I would call the U.S. noobs. It's just that the British created that shit and the U.S., well, some of it anyway, and the U.S. like mastered it in a way never before seen. They're both pros, for sure. They are both pros. Don't get it twisted. Oh, man. In February of 2004, again, the Treasury Department created a panel of 3 administrative judges to prosecute companies and banks that maintain trade relations with Cuba. Okay, so we're just Title III-ing this shit. You understand they could be hiding aid in the Grammy? Oh! Enforced Title III of the Helms-Burton Act, creating a panel of 3 judges whose job it was to preside over Title III lawsuits prosecuting foreign companies working with Cuba and taking over nationalized Cuban properties as part of the deal. Like, also shifting and changing these little things helps the whole propaganda thing if people don't educate themselves. Yeah. It's certainly done intentionally, right? It's not just to be petty, but it is petty. Sure, man. Yeah. Oh boy. The 2004 Commission for Assistance to a Free Cuba report. What do you think a free Cuba means? Do you think a free Cuba means a Cuba that is giving the U.S. companies their nationalized properties back that at this point were taken from them 50 years ago? Or do you think it means like actually helping the people of Cuba? I don't know. It could be either or. It's really a toss-up. On May 6, 2004, the Bush administration published the first report on the Commission for Assistance for a Free Cuba, CFAC. An entity responsible for implementing a special policy toward the island. Ooh, exciting. What could that special policy be? The primary objective of this plan was to return all nationalized properties valued at more than $50,000 to... Okay, yeah. Again, a Cuba that is free is a Cuba that is forced to return nationalized American properties to the U.S. And the more properties they return, the freer they are. It's just, what are we doing? The plan was to return all nationalized properties valued at more than $50,000 to their former owners. Again, former owners being American corporations and millionaires. All right, what am I supposed to say? Published the first report of the Commission for Assistance to a to a... Let me turn my Z key back into a space bar real quick. I'm typing too much here. To a... Whoa, that's too far. To a free Cuba. CFAC. Very generous of them, /S. Yeah, look how freed they are. The purpose of... FYI, Cuba already paid these companies for their property when they left. Yes, and the nationalization is in accordance with international law, and every other country accepted this except for the U.S. The purpose of which was to return all Cuban nationalized properties. I don't have a Z key anymore, so anything that has a Z, I'll type with an S, because I'm using my Z as a spacebar, because my spacebar is a little fucked. Cuban nationalized properties over 50,000 in value to U.S. owners. Because that's what it means for Cuba to be free, I guess, giving its property back to the U.S. And the more of it gives back, the freer it is. I guess. Cool. What do I even do at this point? The Standing Committee for Economic Restructuring and Privatization would take charge of the Cuban economy and all services, including education and healthcare. The report... Today's stream has me in shambles. Yesterday's stream had me breaking shit. Yeah. The report also prescribed that... I can't fucking... That the Standing Committee... How do you spell committee? There you go, 2 M's. 2 M's, 2 T's. The Standing Committee for Economic Reconstruction and Privatization. Again, I'll spell it with an S. Privatization. Privatization would take charge of the Cuban economy and all services. I need to read that twice. I don't know why I thought this was like less. They would take charge of the Cuban economy and all services? Sovereignty, by the way. They would take charge of the entire economy and all services. The former and seriously unpopular, I might add, latifundia land system would be reinstated. Sorry, what? And all Social Security retirement and pension systems would be eliminated? I'm like, I'm what? Huh? That's not even socialism, man. America has that shit. This is like the most basic social safety net. What? All Social Security, retirement, and pension systems will be eliminated. That's like the least. That is the bare minimum social safety net. That's nothing. And even that needs to be eliminated. Because this is what freedom means. Freedom is when you can't control your own country. Yes. We need to build time machines to terminate every single colonizer before they grow up. It's crazy, man. It's wow. What do I even say to that? Cool. In terms of penalties, Cubans living in the U.S. I know this sounds, compared to everything we've talked about so far, I know that what I'm about to say to you sounds like it's smaller scale, right? It sounds like it's not as bad as some of the other shit, right? But just, for some reason, this really hit me. Cubans living in the United States no longer had the right to visit their families for more than 14 days every 3 years. This is what you do to people in prison. And it's inhumane when you do it to prisoners too. This is what you do to people in prison, and it's wrong to do it to prisoners also. It's not like it's okay to do the prisoners. But limiting people's ability to visit their family, these are Cuban nationals. Limiting people's abilities to visit their family is what you do to people in prison, and even in that context, it's wrong. Limited Cubans living in the U.S. is rights to visiting their fucking families to 14 days every 3... I need to bold this. Every 3 years. Not a year, by the way. 2 weeks a year. Any kind of limitation on this is already evil. 2 weeks a year would be insane. 2 weeks every 3 years? Yes, that's a good point, Cupint. Even if you are a Cuban, if you're one of those hardline Cuban conservatives in Miami that is pro-US and anti-Castro, there's a lot of those, right? There's a lot of like, you know, a lot of like, they basically were people who were, you know, they left Cuba when the socialists took over because they were the rich property owners and shit, and it was not good for them, right? Even if you are one of those hardline Cuban conservatives that live in Miami, that hates Castro and loves Bush, you also can't see your fucking family. That's a great point. This even notable that this even affects Cubans in the US that are fucking pro-US and anti-Castro. The fascists will turn on you because you're not the S? Yes. They will use you for what it's worth, but you will never be part of the in club, right? Like, something about this, I don't know, if The whole thing is disgusting, right? But really? Guys. It gets worse. I didn't read the whole thing. Guys, it gets worse. I didn't read the whole thing. Guys, it gets worse. I stopped halfway through the paragraph because I got fucking shell-shocked by what I read. Guys, it gets worse. The Bush administration also redefined the concept of family. Now, uncles, nephews, cousins, and other relatives were no longer considered family, meaning you couldn't visit them at all. It had to be direct or send any financial aid to them at all. It has to directly be like your brother, sister, mother, son. It has to be a member of your immediate family. Your immediate family. You can see for 2 weeks every 3 years. If you have an uncle, nephew, aunt, cousin, you cannot see them at all, nor can you send them any financial aid whatsoever. Because cousins aren't family, apparently. Nephews aren't family, apparently. I don't have any other things to add to the text. Like, I've already italicized it and bolded it. Like, I guess I just bold, italicize, underline. Like, I have no more fancy things to add. I feel like I need to make this red. They also fucking redefined the word family. Apparently, nephews, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. no longer count as fucking family. And you can actually never visit them or send any financial aid back to them at all. Even grandparents? I don't actually know how grandparents count for this. I'm actually not sure. It says uncles, nephews, cousins, and other relatives. I'm actually not sure if grandparents counts. Oh, only grandparents, parents, siblings, spouses, and children. So grandparents count. Grandparents, parents, siblings, spouses, and children are family. Nothing else is family. Oh. Also, by the way, even for the people who you can send financial aid to, parents, siblings, spouses, children, grandparents, there is a daily limit on how much money you can send. I'll say there was a daily limit on how much money you can send. And get this, you're gonna love this part. And Bush cut it by 66%. From $164 to $50. By over 66%. So, even the people that you can send aid back to, $50 a day. Max. $50 a day. $50. You know, unrelated, right? Unrelated. I visited my mom today. Me, my brother, his wife. We all went and we visited my mom, and it was very fun. We got some food. You know, we picked up some food on the way. We picked up some burrito boys. I was very pleasantly surprised by Burrito Boys. I got a gluten-free quesadilla, a steak and cheese quesadilla, and I got it with gluten-free tortilla because it said it had way less calories. And I figured that, I figured the gluten-free tortilla was going to be like this sort of disgusting, like, gooey amalgam of, like, garbage, right? Because I always just expect gluten-free things to not be very good. But, it had half as many calories, and I am trying to lose weight, and I was like, the quesadilla is still going to taste good, probably, so it's fine. No. It was actually really nice. The gluten, I don't know, I think it's corn flour or something, maybe? Right? I think it's, like, corn flour or something. I'm not sure. But it was really tasty. It was really tasty. I liked it a lot. I got a quesadilla, and my brother and his wife got some burrito bowls, and I think my mom got like a burrito or maybe also a burrito bowl, right? That food, granted, I'm not saying it's the cheapest thing ever, but it's just a meal. It is a meal that we ate as a family. Cost 75 Canadian dollars. What's 75 Canadian dollars to US? Just thinking out loud here. Just thinking out loud. Just out of curiosity. What's 75 CADs to USD? Oh, $50. Now, of course, this is in today's money. This was 2004. So, like, this is probably, like, it's probably closer to the equivalent of, like, $80 or $90 today or whatever, right? Actually, no, let's see. $50, 50 USD in 2004 today. Yeah, about $88, right? So sure, right? But that meal we had was their fucking daily stipend that you could send back to your family. We had 4 people ate one burrito, 3 burrito bowls, and 1 quesadilla. And that was the equivalent of the max amount of money you could send back to your family in Cuba a day. It seems humane. I don't want to read this anymore. This is just petty. This is just petty. Luggage sent. Luggage taken on these visits for 14 days every 3 years, by the way, could not exceed 20 kilos. And it became illegal to pay extra for overweight baggage. Really? 20 kilos is already lighter than usual. Most airlines that I know of allow you like 23 and a half. But it's like, if you really need to bring over more shit, they will charge you through the nose to put that overweight baggage on. Not if you're a Cuban visiting your family for 14 days every 3 years. Nope. It is literally illegal for you to pay through the nose for overweight baggage. You can't even do that. You don't even have the privilege of getting ripped off by the airline. 20 kilos, and that is it. Why? Like, it's just so petty. It is so needlessly constricting. I hate how openly evil these people are, and how they don't even feel the need to hide it. We're just all so distracted by the trappings of everyday life that we don't feel. This is just a quote that you could probably look up and find. When asked about the cruel nature of these measures that divide families, Daniel W. Fisk, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, made the following comments. Once every 3 years, each individual can decide when he wishes to travel, and it is for him to make that decision. So, if a family member is dying, he is free to choose the right time to travel. And people think you can peacefully resist your way out of this system, huh? It's like, well, I know you can only see your family once every 3 years, but like, you know, if they're like dying, you can go visit them, I guess. God forbid that a second family member starts dying within 3 years. I mean, you use your time up, bro. It's not my fault. It's not my fault you used your time up because one of them fucking died. Bro. You can choose when to visit them. Did I tell them when you had to visit them? No, bro. You can choose. If a guy's dying, go visit him. Oh, what happens if another guy starts dying within 3 years? No, bro, stop asking somebody. You decided to go there. What did I do? Did I force you to go? No, you can choose. Like, no, you can't choose, really? No, of course not. But, like, it's just so callous to be like, well, I mean, like, if their family members are dying, like, they can choose to visit then. I wish you could say it's a level of hatred for the Cuban people, but it's not. It's just business, and that's so much worse. Yes, that is literally so much worse. Like, somehow, if there was just this vitriolic hatred of this group of people, it would at least feel explainable. This is just, like, evil for evil's sake. Like, it's just, number must go up, and any end will justify those means. Sorry, any means will justify that end. They're just so casual about it. If it was like this vitriolic hatred and they were all just red in the face angry, but no, man, they're like making jokes about it and talking about it like it's the weather. Oh, you know, they can choose wherever they go. Like, it's up to them. They could, what any period in that 3 years, they can choose. If someone's dying, I guess they could go visit them. It's so nonchalant, which is just, it's so disgusting. Sure, man. What do I even write a note on that? Like, what do I do? I don't understand. I don't understand, man. Daniel Fisk, Deputy Secretary of State. Deputy Secretary of State, when asked about how cruel these measures were, said, I don't even want to type this quote out again, man. Yeah, okay. Let me just put this here, hold this so I can type. Once every 3 years, each individual can decide when he wishes to travel, and it is for him to make the decision. So if a family member is dying, he is free to choose the right time to travel. Awesome. The commission also continued. The commission also allocated 36 million more to fund internal opposition to the Cuban regime. Sure. Why not? That's like normal at this point. That's not even surprising at this point. Oh boy. The second report of 2006. To them, rooting the lives of hundreds of millions of people is as normal as mowing a lawn? Yeah, I mean, who cares, right? At the end of the day, if I need to mow a lawn to make money, or if I need to mow 100 people to make money, we have to make money. It doesn't matter. Whatever I can do to maximize to maximize the green, maximize the profit, it's all the same. Because the pursuit of capital is like the ultimate justifier of anything. Nothing is too far. Nothing is any different. It's all one under the sun, right? Killing 1,000 people or like running a Super Bowl ad, it's the same thing. Who cares? I say 1,000. It really is like at best tens of thousands, right? Like at minimum, it's tens of thousands. The second report of 2006, guys, this was the first report of the standing. This was the first report, by the way. This was the first report of the Commission of Assistance for a Free Cuba. Guys, that was the first report. Are you excited for this, all of this, all of this? Are you excited for the second report of 2006? That'll be better, probably, right? That'll be way better, probably. Only 1 year, by the way? Yeah, this was 2004. This was as soon as the fucker took office, right? Or was that a second term? Bush presidency terms. Oh, yeah, it was a second term. Okay, it was a second term, 2004. They would literally destroy the world to make number go up. They are! They are! It's not even a theoretical. They are actively destroying the world to make number go up. That's what fucking climate change is. They are actively bombing places out of existence and destroying the environment to make number go up. They are actively destroying the world to make number. It's not even a hypothetical. All right, man. The second report of 2006. You guys excited? All right, this is taking longer than I thought. I don't know if we'll get to the actual... Maybe we'll do the presentation at the start of tomorrow, and then we'll research something else afterwards. There's just so much... There's so many man-made horrors. I just... It stun-locks me, man. It fucking stun-locks me. In 2006, the Commission for Assistance to a Free Cuba released a second plan. A second plan has hit the towers. For its development, the Bush administration implemented impressive means. Nearly 100 people drawn from 17 federal departments and voluntary agencies spent several months preparing the new department. A total budget of $80 million was allocated for its implementation for between 2007 and 2008. It provides $31 million to finance opponents of the regime, $10 million for lobbying activists to be conducted... for lobbying activities conducted within universities, $24 million to upgrade propaganda used against the island, and $15 million to rally the world to the foreign policy of the United States. In addition, the report envisages funding of at least $20 million annually until the dictatorship ceases to exist. What is your sources for all this? Not saying I'm skeptical, just curious. I'm reading a book called The Economic War on Cuba. I am reading a book called The Economic War Against Cuba by Salim Lamrani. And their sources for this are the US government. Many of these quotes are taken, like, from the statements put out by Washington, the White House, and the CIA. Every time I've looked something up from this book, it has come, like, you know, we on stream right now, for example, we just looked up Title III of the Helms-Burton Act that apparently let the United States sue companies that, like, sue foreign companies. If you're a French company and you do business in Cuba, a U.S. court will sue you. I didn't even know it was fucking possible. And I looked it up, and it's real. So, I mean, every time I've double-checked anything this book has said, it has seemed to check out. And again, it kind of makes sense because this book is at least claiming to be citing the CIA and the White House. They are not necessarily, like, they are not citing, like, journalism from the Soviets or something, right? Okay, man. Thanks. Yeah, no worries. At this point, the only thing that will make them not make number go up is killing themselves. They're doing that too. It's Ouroboros. It's eating itself, man. It's literally eating itself. Billionaires are dying in submarines. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay. The report envisages funding of at least $20 million annually until the dictatorship ceases to exist. Yes. Cuba is certainly the dictator. Like, from what I've seen so far, Cuba is certainly the dictatorship in this. If one of them is a dictatorship, which is what they're positing, they're saying, obviously they're not saying the US is. They're saying one of them is a dictatorship. If one of these two countries is a dictatorship, it's certainly Cuba. That seems right. That seems right. Right? This is the thing that they're happy enough to admit it. I mean, I think... Sorry, my ear itches a shit ton. I don't know what's happening. I think on the one hand, they're happy enough to admit it, yes. I think on the other hand, it is very useful to publicize all this shit. Let me give you a weird example. I'm playing Fire Emblem Three Houses right now on Maddening because I saw my friend play it and I thought it looked really fun, and it has been really fun. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, you might know, very, very early on, there is a mission where a rebel lord, you guys all work for the Church of Saros, right? And very early on, some minor lord of one of the kingdoms of the region, Lord Lonato, rises up in rebellion against the Church. Right? The Church sends you, along with one of their strongest knights, to suppress this rebellion. Why did they send you and the students that they are training to become officers, military officers? Why did they send you guys to suppress this? Well, the Archbishop of the Church, Lady Rhea, says it to the teacher, you in this case, Byleth is the professor of this class, in no uncertain terms, multiple times. She says, this should serve as a very clear lesson for the students about what happens to people who turn their swords against God. Why is she doing it? Why is she showing these impressionable students the acts of cruelty that the Church is going to impose upon these dissenters? It's to let them learn by example. It's a terror strategy. You saw how powerful our knights are. You saw how easily we were able to crush this rebellion. Keep that in mind. Right? You're not in any danger right now. You're not in any danger right now. But just in case you ever get any revolutionary thoughts, in case you ever get any thoughts about opposing the Church, just keep this in mind. Keep in mind what we're capable of, right? Now that's Three Houses. In a very similar way, if the US government and the CIA wanted to keep this shit private, they probably could pretty easily, right? What purpose is it to be so public about how much you're trying to destroy this country that went against them? It's terror. They are terrorists in the definition of the word. They want to scare everybody else into compliance. Do you see what happens to people who don't do what we tell them? This is how they are able to bully everyone else into complying with the sanctions on Cuba. Because they have the example, Cuba, of what happens when you don't listen. If another country staunchly refuses to join in on the embargo, they can just become the next Cuba. They are happy enough to admit it because it serves a purpose of terrorism. Making these acts of the violations of the humanity and human rights of the Cubans public is a terrorist strategy. It lets every other country know, subtly or not so subtly, that this is what they have to look forward to if they ever turn against the US. Billionaire priority list, money, then literally anything else, including their own lives. It's true, man. It's true. That submarine was a hero, man. That submarine's a real comrade. Oh, boy. All right. The second report of 2006 allocated a ton of funding for propaganda and supporting internal enemies of the Cuban government within Cuba. As well as 15 million to rally the rest of the world to foreign policy, to the foreign policy goals of the US with regards to Cuba. Yes, I've heard about this, Cupid. I'm Australian, and the one time our government went against the US, the one time, yeah, there was a prime minister or something that, like, did something that was like actively against the U.S. interest. They used an obscure law we have that has never been used before to coup the government out. Yes. It was like the Governor General has the ability to just kick out the Australian Prime Minister at any time or something. It's kind of like how the Queen can technically depose the Canadian Prime Minister at any point. Right? Again, it is a terrorist strategy. It is literally, I'm not saying it metaphorically or rhetorically or philosophically or any other kind of fancy way. It is terrorism. It is terrorism in the strictest definition of the word. The entire point of Cuba doing this is to scare countries. Basically, the U.S. scared every other country to not fighting back, even though they could, I think. Sure, if all of them oppose the U.S., yes. But the idea is if you're one guy opposing the U.S., you can't... It's basically it's a macrocosm of revolution within the U.S. If one citizen tried to revolt against the U.S., it couldn't work, and the U.S. threatens you with the police and the firing squad, right? They have the monopoly on violence. They threaten you with death. If every U.S. citizen rose up in revolution, it will be over in a night. But because you don't know what the others are thinking, and because if you do it by yourself or in a small group you die, it scares everyone into compliance. It is the exact same thing, but on a diplomatic and international scale. If every country in the world all decided to embargo the states and trade with Cuba, the U.S. would be forced to change their policy overnight. But no country can ever be sure that that's going to happen. And there's a lot of incentive for other countries to not do that. And if you are one country that decides to do it, you just become the next Cuba. So nobody does anything. Terrorism. In the strictest definition of the word, it is terrorism. It is using fear as a weapon to scare people into changing their behavior. Terrorism. Oh. As well, the Bush administration set... Oh, that is not how you spell administration. The Bush administration set an 18-month deadline for the overthrow of the Cuban government. In classic George Bush fashion, he is maybe overestimating himself just a little bit, huh? In classic George Bush fashion, he is maybe overestimating his ability to get things done a little bit. You know? If you know the backstory behind Bush standing in front of a giant sign that said mission accomplished, like what was it, like a year or two into like what ended up being the 20-year Iraq war? Or is this Afghanistan? God, I can't fucking even remember. But like standing in front of just standing in front of a fucking sign of going mission accomplished in year one of like 20 of a quagmire in the Middle East. Bush is not exactly known for being the best judge of his own capabilities. And I don't know if you know this, but that 18-month deadline they set to overthrow the Cuban government didn't really happen. Beat the U.S. by convincing every other country to fight back? How though? Oh, you have no control over that at all. All you can do is control your own country, right? All you can do is, as a U.S., like, you know, it's quicker to do it through internal revolution through the U.S. than convincing every country to fight back. That's like a significantly larger task, honestly. The U.S. is doing a pretty good job of convincing countries to leave them alone by just being the world's greatest schoolyard bully right now anyway. Well, that didn't work. The new plan aimed to implement Titles 3 and 4 of the Helms-Burton Act in certain countries. Its primary target was the Venezuela president Hugo Chavez. As Venezuela's largest trading partner, as Cuba's largest trading partner, Venezuela is mentioned 15 times in the report. The report aimed for liberal use of Title 3 and 4 of 3 and 4 of the Helms-Burton Act to squeeze, I can't type squeeze, to hurt Cuba, namely against Venezuela. I can't spell Venezuela. I'm gonna spell Venezuela wrong. I'm sorry, I don't have a Z button. It's my space key. Namely against Venezuela, as it was Cuba's biggest trading partner at the time. Venezuela is mentioned 15 times in the report. So start with internal revolution, then progress from there. Yeah, I mean, if we start, that already is a huge undertaking, right? I think if internal revolution is successful in the US, we're in a completely different state anyway, right? A completely different global order, so it's fine. That's not just really start. That can be an end in and of itself in some ways, right? That can be the thing you build towards for years and decades. From there, yeah, exactly. Like, progress from there. But again, yeah, that's already like a lot easier said than done, naturally. All right. What else, man? What fucking else? Oh, of course. The 2006 measures also affected the medical field. Because why not? Although the major part of the world's medical technology originates from the US now prohibits any export of medical equipment to third countries for use in large-scale programs destined for foreign patients. These sanctions clearly undermine Cuban medical cooperation with third world countries, the aim of which is to reduce the capacity of the island to provide medical services. Have you ever wondered why the US is a weird hate bone for Venezuela? This is why. That makes sense. So, it prohibited any export of medical equipment to third countries, non-Cuba US countries, for use in large-scale programs designed for foreign patients. This was aimed to make it so Cuba couldn't help other countries as much. And that other countries couldn't help Cuba as much for medical services. The report also further restricted medical cooperation between Cuba and any other country because the Geneva Conventions are the Geneva Conventions are just toilet paper at this point. Who cares? Literally, who cares? Who cares about the fact that the US signed and ratified the Geneva Convention too? My dad didn't teach me to back down. Something was hard and scary. I'm ready for change. Yeah. Now, the unglamorous part of revolution is that it starts with just becoming a member of a community. Dog sitting for your neighbors, doing the goddamn dishes. You can't organize for shit if you don't have a community. That's the unglamorous part. The Molotovs and the Cuban cigars and the fixing the world is the fun part. Well, at least the glamorous part. But there's a lot of dishes that need to be done before that. There's a lot of embedding yourself in a community and, tackling the awkwardness and socialization and the just general, cost of community while still reaping the benefits. You can't revolt for shit if you are not part of a community. It's a good thing overall. It's a good thing. But that takes work. That takes work and social effort and overcoming a lot of social conditioning to ignore your neighbors and members of your community and just sit in your little isolated bubble and play video games or whatever, right? That's the first steps of change. Because you can't, it is scary and hard, yes. And change is necessary, yes. But you can't enact change with one people, 2 people, 100 people, You need to organize within your community, and then your community needs to be able to join forces with other communities until it becomes a world's, a countrywide movement eventually. But you have to start with the first building block of that. You cannot skip any of the steps. And the first step of that is being a member of a community that you are tight-knit with, that you can rely on, that you can organize with, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be your neighbors or something. But if you have no other source of community, that is the easiest first step. All right, cool, awesome. What else, man? Finally, the plan contained a secret annex that would not be disclosed for reasons of national security. What does that mean? What's in that shit? For reasons of national... In this regard, Ricardo Alarcón, president of Cuban parliament, expressed his concern. Oh, he basically is saying, like, these guys are openly talking about the millions they're going to give in funding to overthrow our government, the millions in propaganda, all of these sanctions. He basically is like, what the fuck could possibly still be left there to be top secret? Better go to my local and make some friends? That's a great place to start, Apollo. If you're a fighting game player, go to your locals. The fighting game space tends to also be, like, more progressive than average. You know? Go to your locals. Make friends. You know, make friends with your TO. If you guys can organize together, you know, whether, like, even putting some amount of minor, if you guys can, like, you know, protest together, if you guys can raise funds for causes together, eventually, it doesn't have to be right away. Obviously, in fact, it shouldn't be right away. Nobody is going to do anything like this with you if they just met you. They need to be your friends. It sounds cliche, right? It sounds cliche. Our only way out of this is friendship and human connection. It truly is that the only way to defeat evil is through love. It sounds stupid. It's real. Community is our only way out of this, and community can only be created through friendship and genuine human connection. So, like, literally, go to your local and make some friends. You can start changing some minds. You know, you can start having some discussions with people, maybe. So you're already making an impact there, because you're only one person, right? You can only make so much impact. And then, if you have a lot of like-minded people, right? If you have a lot of like-minded people in your community, one person can't do very much. 30, they can start doing some shit, you know? They can start having, like, a measurable impact in the neighborhood your local takes place in. Right? Maybe your community can start, like, 30 people could maybe change a lot more minds. One person can't. 30 people could maybe inspire a lot more people. That group could keep growing. 30 people could start as a neighborhood organization, and as more, you know, if more of the neighborhood decides that they like what's happening here, they just want to be, you know, friends with you guys. I mean, this is how you end up with unions, basically, for example. This is also how, like, this is how you end up with community organization and mutual aid. It has to start with one person, but it's just a bunch of people who are friendly enough and have a common goal. It really is that simple. The power of friendship is winning us this battle. Yeah, like, it sounds... the cynic in me wants to be like, that's immature and silly and stupid, but, like, it's the only way. Propaganda convinces that friendship is dumb? Yeah. It's not childish, it's real. You can think of a better way to do it than to gather millions of people over time. You let me know. And the only way to have that much is people just need to be, you know, there need to be communities, and those communities have to join up with other communities. But the existence of those communities that even, you know, those individual building blocks, those things are built on friendship and support and mutual aid. That's it. It's the only thing that creates community in the first place. So it really is just based in friendship. It also contained one secret section that was not disclosed for national security concerns. To which, wasn't it Ricardo Alarcón? Or no, maybe, yeah, Ricardo Alarcón. To which Ricardo Alarcón, president of Cuban parliament, basically said, if all... Well, I'm not going to quote this, because it's not actually a quote. If all of this horrendous shit in this report is what you publicized, what could you possibly be keeping top secret? My God. I am paraphrasing, obviously, but that's basically what he says. The actual quote, if you want to hear it, For the United States, national security is a concept that is inextricably linked to the military and its covert operations. After divulging all of this, tens of millions of dollars more for their mercenaries, new economic restrictions and illegal actions taken against international trade and the sovereignty of Cuba and other nations, additional punishments for Cuba and citizens of other countries, and after having made public more than 2 years ago their plan that describes in minute detail their intention to recolonize Cuba. After all of that, what remains to be hidden as top secret? What are they hiding for reasons of national security and effective realization? More terrorist attacks? New assassination attempts against Fidel? Military aggression? When it comes to Bush and his buddies, anything is possible. But yeah, the idea is basically like, the stuff that they're saying publicly and doing publicly is so horrendous that I shudder to think about what they could be keeping top secret because they think it's too important to hide, or too important that they have to hide it. All right, we're going to finish with Bush and then call it, I think. We have one more section titled Working Group for the Implementation of Sanctions Against Cuba. Haven't we already implemented the sanctions against Cuba? Working Group for the Implementation of Sanctions Against Cuba. Because apparently they haven't implemented enough of those? What the fuck is this? On October 10th, 2006, the Working Group for the Implementation of Sanctions Against Cuba, a new body charged with tightening the restrictions against Cuba. I don't even know what's left to tighten. Was founded with the objective of hounding travel agencies, businesses, and citizens that break the laws already in force. Oh, I see. It's an enforcement body. Created in 2006 to hound organizations. That's a good quote. If they're this honest about being this evil, what could they possibly be hiding? Yes, yeah, it's a really good point. Organizations, to hound organizations and countries that break, that's not how you spell organizations, it's with an I, that break the laws already established by the embargo. An enforcement body, basically. Okay. Yep. Alexander Acosta, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, presented the new entity, which was composed of several government agencies, such as the Office of Foreign Assets Control, the Treasury Department, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the IRS, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the Department of Commerce, as well as the Coast Guard and Border Patrol. What? Police for foreign nations? Yes. Yes. Police for foreign nations. It included multiple... It was a cooperative project between multiple U.S. departments, such as, like, the FBI, the IRS, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and more. Fun. Actually, you know what? I feel like this is actually so crazy how many are involved in this. You have to list all of them out, right? You have to list all of them out, because it really is, like, including the Office of Foreign Asset Control. You think it was an international org or something, but no, just U.S. overreach again. Yep, nope. Oops, all U.S. overreach. The U.S. Treasury Department, the Department of Homeland Security in Cuba. Weird, interesting. Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the IRS, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, by the way. Back at it again with the white vans. The Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce. The Coast Guards. And U.S. Border Patrol. Is this really necessary? Office of Foreign Asset Control, U.S. Treasury Department, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the IRS, the ICE, the Department of Commerce, the Coast Guard, and the Border Patrol. You need all of this for little old Cuba? Sure. Acosta said strengthening the sanctions against Cuba was one of the country's political priorities. We want to show clearly which federal agencies are in a state of alert to ensure the regulations against Cuba are properly applied. Does that sound familiar? It's terrorism again. The whole point of including all these people is to go look at all of these very powerful U.S. departments that are watching you. All this shit was happening before I was born. Now I'm feeling bad because everything being done by Netanyahu and Trump is happening while I'm playing Tokan on my bedroom. Two things. One, Cuba is still sanctioned to this day. So that is still happening while you're playing Tokan in your bedroom. This is not history. This is still happening. The sanctions against Cuba are worse than they've ever been and are actively there. And two, it's not that you can't play Tokan in your bedroom. It is important to live and love and celebrate and laugh and you know, because you have to remind yourself what you're fighting for. But don't just play Tokan in your bedroom. There is nothing wrong with enjoying your life, but prioritize embedding yourself in community and organizing. You know, or at least not prioritize over everything else, but make it something that is a goal you're working towards actively. There's nothing wrong with loving your life and you know, hanging out with your friends. Because again, despair is the tool of the enemy. Hope is the tool of the revolutionary. You can't, if you ever give up and you're just like, everything is shit and horrible and there's no way things can change, they win. So you have to remind yourself what you're fighting for by having a good time. But but you can do both. You can play Tokan in your bedroom, right? And you can also work towards trying to make change in your community. Both are not mutually exclusive. And there's nothing wrong with playing Tokan in your bedroom, as long as it's not the only thing you do. Alexander Acosta, the guy who proposed this, said that the idea with all of these departments cooperating was to show clearly which federal agencies are on a state of alert to ensure that the regulations against Cuba are properly applied. Oh, my semicolon key came off. Hold on, let me try and put this back in here. My keyboard is kind of falling apart. I really should buy a new one. It's like my semicolon key and my 8 key. If I ever hit them a little too hard, they just fly off. There you go. Applied. In a word, fear tactics. In a different word, terrorism. If that's really helpful. I was in the gutter mentally watching last stream. Thanks, man. Despair is a tool of the elite. It is like it again. It might sound as childish as you can imagine, but genuinely, hope, belief in a better world, the love of life, and friendship are ways out of this. And then eventually, you know, all of those things coalescing into like guns and Molotov cocktails and things like that. But those are the tools. Those are the tools. Those are the actual, you know, that's the shit that gets shit done when the time comes, right? But to get there, the tools that get you there, genuinely, are a love of life, friends, family, happiness, and hope for a better world. Genuinely. It's not easy to just understand, to see all of this shit that's happening and be able to stay positive. And it's even less easy when you're the people who it's affecting, right? We are in a huge position of privilege to be reading about what happened to Cuba or what is happening to Cuba, right? Reading about Operation Condor, reading about Israel-Palestine, and not to be the Cubans, you know, to be the Chileans or the Guatemalans or whatever, to be the Palestinians. It's significantly obvious, and I'm not going to try and tell anyone, right? I'm not going to try and preach hope to any of those people, but I hope that they can, like, I mean, a lot of them, you know, do maintain that hope because it really is the only thing you have. I can't speak on that at all. Obviously, I am in such a ridiculous position of privilege. I can only speak to people in my equivalent or similar level of privilege, where we are just, this isn't directly, a lot of this stuff isn't directly affecting us, but even just finding out about it is incredibly mentally demoralizing. We can't let that happen. Because we are the ones in the position of privilege, we are the ones that are the safest. Right? The reason that our countries, I mean, the reason the Canadian government isn't killing me like it's killing the Cubans or the Palestinians, the reason the US government isn't killing US citizens like it's killing fucking everyone else in the world, right? Indonesians, Koreans, Vietnamese people, almost everyone in fucking South America, right? Like anything. Palestinians, like, you know, people in Sudan, people in like anything, in the Congo, whatever, is because we are useful alive. They don't need to kill us to take our resources because we live there. We are useful alive as supporters of the system and as worker bees. We are in a position of privilege where we have to, like, really step out of line before they will just put a bullet in our head and kill us. We have to use that. We have to use that. It's not like they care about us anymore necessarily, but we are, by and large, more useful to them alive than dead for now. A Cuban is more useful to them dead, because all they want out of Cuba is they want all the natural resources, and that is the easiest to take if no one lives on the island. We are more useful alive than dead because we go and work in companies and, you know, we make the engine run. We got to use that while we can, because eventually it won't be the case. Why do you think they're all pushing for AI so hard? What do you think happens if AI can do every job that you do right now? What difference do you have from the Cuban? Any value you had to the fascist disappears overnight. Why do you think they are putting literally trillions of dollars into AI development? Besides the fact that they're trying to make God, and the companies think that whoever, you know, develops AGI first will basically take over the world. It's also because AI is a revolution for the capital owner. It is a level of automation never before seen. It can truly break the balance where, for all his oppression, the capitalist needs the working class to work. You know? The factories do not operate themselves. The companies do not employ air. The capitalist needs the working class to work. If they get what they want out of the AI, they don't anymore. It's even more dystopian than you think, this AI development shit, man. So while we have this position of privilege, where we are more useful alive than dead, we need to use it to mobilize. Oh boy. All right, man. What else? In the case of proven violations, offenders would risk penalties of up to 10 years in prison and $1 million of fines. Offenders could get 10 years in prison and millions of dollars in fines. This applied to individual Cuban citizens. Individual Cubans who wanted to visit their sick mother in Cuba, but had already used up their 14 days. By the way, just in case you forgot about that part. Just in case you forgot about that part. If you had already visited your mother for more than 2 weeks in the past 3 years, and your mother was sick in Cuba and tired and needed your help, and you went to go visit her, you could be, an individual citizen, could be fined millions of dollars and get 10 years in prison for visiting your mother in Cuba. We're the good guys, by the way. We are the good guys. In case anybody forgot, I just want to, we are the good guys. Don't forget, we are the good guys. Ignore all that. We're the good, trust me. I don't know how exactly, but we are the good guys for sure. We are definitely, the countries we live in have definitely not been the world's foremost evil for the past several hundred years. We are not the original axis of evil. The Nazis definitely did not look up their fucking torture manuals from the US. What the US did to slaves. The Nazis definitely did not copy the US slave industrial fucking complex's homework in regards to what they did with the Holocaust. That's not true. We're definitely not the original axis of evil in the modern world. That's no. We're the good guys. Look, they could have just executed you. Ruining your life is financially better. Yeah. Watch this give me fuel from evolutionary fire. You can never be angry enough. Don't be angry all the time. Don't just become an angry, bitter person who hates everything. But keep that anger somewhere. Because it will be useful. And you can never have enough. One person, cannot possibly comprehend the amount of evil that is happening here and can never properly be. One person does not have the capacity to be angrier than they need to be about this. It doesn't exist. No matter how angry you are, get angrier. Oh my. Oh. This also applied if you sent more than $50 a day back, by the way. Any violation had this penalty. Remember how the limit was you could only send $50 a day back to your family? The heart and brain have multiple chambers for a reason. Damn right. If you sent $51 back to your family and they found evidence of that and could prove it, 10 years in prison, millions of dollars fine. Hey, out of curiosity, U.S. mandatory minimum sentence for rape. Oh, cool. All right, state laws. There is no federal U.S. mandatory minimum for rape, by the way. There is a U.S. mandatory minimum for sending your Cuban mother $51 a day. Just so you know where the priorities sit. There is a federally mandated minimum prison sentence and monetary fine for sending your Cuban mother $51 a day. There is no federal mandatory minimum for rape. Just pointing that out. I'm cooked. I sent my dad at least $500 this year. Well, it's $50 a day. So theoretically, your yearly limit is $18,000. Right? So you're fine. Don't do it in more than $50 increments a day, though. Be careful. They still fine you if they had a single suspicion of you breaking the law. Oh, yeah. Supposedly, it's proven violations, but you know. As we know, 15 days in 3 years is worse than rape. Oh, of course. Brick, if I may ask, where'd you get all this philosophical wisdom and knowledge from? The Cuba stuff in specific, I am currently reading a book called The Economic War Against Cuba by Salim Lamrani. The book itself also cites all of its sources at the end. I can show that as well if you want to see that without, like, just reading the book. But a lot of the quotes are from the U.S. State Department, the CIA, like, secretaries of state. It is from the U.S. It is getting it directly from the horse's mouth, right? I would recommend you buy and read this book, though. This book is really good. This book is really eye-opening to just how ridiculous it is, truly, right? Yeah. Oh, by the way, similarly, any American tourist who spends a weekend in Havana could receive the same punishment. Not even Cuban. Because you couldn't do this under the sanctions either. 10 years in prison, $1 million in fines. You guys having fun? Was this fun for anyone else? We'll get into Obama tomorrow, I suppose. Or maybe I'll do Obama off stream and then create the PowerPoint, and then we can go over the PowerPoint and then keep going after. But you guys have fun? Was this as fun for you as it was for me? I think I do like bringing you guys along for the ride here, but wow. Insert Spec Ops line, the do you feel like a hero yet? Yeah. No? Yeah, me neither. So definitely something. Yep. Yep. We're the good guys, by the way. Just quick reminder, we're the good guys. Just, you know, I'm gonna go play some Three Houses, because I will say, after these streams, I always find myself needing to just dunk my head in a bucket of ice water. Like, metaphorically. I need to decompress after this shit. You should really become a teacher of some kind. I would love to. That is kind of the goal, too. Like, I mean, even, like, this channel event, like, you know, obviously right now, expect it. None of this is a surprise to me. Stream viewership and video viewership has tanked, right? For multiple reasons. One, I've completely about face, so I've lost a lot of my audience. I really appreciate those of you who have stuck around, or those of you who are new. Some of these names are new. I think you guys joined recently. But that's okay. I got no problem with that. It's a long-term thing, right? But also, I'm not very good at making this content yet, right? Like, this is a completely new style of content, and I'm still trying to figure out what the best ways to deliver this information are to people. But the idea with this eventually would be for this to be like an educational channel, basically. The point is to open people's eyes to what's been happening, and, you know, hopefully they make their own conclusions from there. I think it's very hard to see all of this shit and assume that, like, you know, the current system is good and just, right? Can I ask you decided to pivot completely political content? You just feel that compelled, or are you getting a little bored of streaming games? I don't think I was getting bored of streaming games, Fox. I think it was a matter of, I did just feel like I needed, I had absorbed too much negativity about the world, right? I'd absorbed too much negativity about the world, and I just felt like I needed to do something. And this was the only, thing I had where I could immediately make a change, is use this tiny platform I have, and more importantly, pivot this tiny platform I have to, you know, eventually, if it gets big, being for a better cause, you know? You did a good job explaining Granblue, pretty confident you can figure out a path. Yeah, me too. You get better for sure. A lot of the time, this kind of content seems to get viewership from scripted videos. Though, yeah, exactly, Fath. But it is like, I had an idea for like a content pipeline for how, you know, Granblue streams turn into Granblue videos. This is going to be a whole new content pipeline. How do I structure my streams? How do I get multiple YouTube videos out of a stream? How do I edit those videos? Because a lot of this, I'm going to upload less commonly now. I've already am, right? It's not going to be 2 videos a day. So it's going to be more rare uploads. So the quality of those uploads should go up in, you know, in accordance. So how do I edit those to make them more engaging? Like, this whole process, exactly, yeah. And I am very openly not good at this right now. I literally just now, for the first time, I'm like, this could be a structure of a stream where the goal of a stream is to do some research on a topic, create a presentation on that topic, with you guys as part of the stream. At the end of the stream, go through summarizing what we've learned in that presentation, and that's a YouTube video. And I can then cut that YouTube video down and make it a video, right? So, like, that is, like, I've only just today finally been like, that's an idea for a pipeline. Of course, it's a very raw idea, and there's a lot of refinement in, like, how you actually do that. But it's an idea. It's something for me to work towards and iterate on now. So, yeah. But yeah, I am just what I found, Fox, is not that I was bored of video games, but that this is what I'm passionate about. It had been for the past several months, and it just took my brain a while to connect the dots. That like I liked playing Granblue, I liked playing Tokon, but this is what I'm passionate about these days. You know what I mean? You consider doing a bit of both types of content? I did for a bit, but I think maybe this is a little short-sighted. But for me, I was like, this is such a big change. If I'm gonna do it, I want to just do it entirely. You know, I felt like I couldn't half-ass this. I felt like I had to put my whole bussy into it, or I could never get good at it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that is what I feel, and it's still how I feel. Maybe later, if this becomes like second nature and really easy, we could fit in some less serious streams every now and then. I'm not rigid, but for now, this is my main and only focus because I need to get good at doing it, and I'm not. I'm very bad at doing it right now. Hopefully we'll improve quickly. I am very motivated to do so. Personally, I'm proud people like you can see the injustices and make a change to not ignore it all. I did for a long time, right? I did for a long time. But, you know, I just realized I have a hotkey to switch these scenes. I genuinely did not know I had that. That's really cool. So, you know, better late than never, though. I might be late to the party, but better late than never. My family even figured out how to make a difference by giving food and clothes to local homeless people. Yeah, even that, man. Helping people out. Like, obviously, charity is a really big thing. But, like, well, and that, I don't mean to discredit that at all. That is very useful. But the goal eventually, and I'm not at all disparaging that, but the goal eventually is to, like, that is treating a symptom, right? The goal of eventually of mutual aid, community organization, things like this, is to address the root cause. You know what I mean? But obviously that's really good. It's like that is still, that's better, that's way better than nothing, and that is still a beautiful thing. You know what I mean? And obviously, like, local homeless people are really going to appreciate, they don't, like, in reality, they are forced to think short term because, you know, every day is, where am I getting food? Where am I getting shelter? So obviously it's amazing. It's a great thing. Keep doing that. That's awesome. I'm very happy to hear that. But it's like that, and then we also have to go above and beyond. Mutual aid in communities can, like, employ these people. You know, like, eventually, if there's an organized community and you know people who are in the community who have, you know, like, someone in your community, like, that, you know, you guys can employ homeless people, get them out of that situation. Completely, you know, solve the root cause, at least in your community, in your neighborhood. That's fair. I really appreciate what you're doing. I guess I'm still just selfishly mourning the fun there was in the space before. That's fair, Fox. And I understand that too. I think I am mourning. I am sort of mourning when I used to be able to not think about these things. Because it was just a simpler, naiver, more idealistic, like, halcyon time, right? But again, this is where it always goes back to, we are privileged enough to choose whether or not we think about these things. If you are Cuban, if you are Palestinian, if you are at all a member of the global south, if you are black in America, if you are a woman most of the time, right? If you are queer in any capacity, the parts of the politics that are about you, at the very least, you can't really choose to ignore. Right? And then in, you know, severe cases where you are, like, you know, again, like, say you are a Cuban living under these sanctions, the politics is killing you and your family and your loved ones. It's actively leading to the death of your community. You don't really get to choose to be apolitical or at that point. Right? So, while I am, at least right now, still privileged enough to just have fun and not think about this stuff, it just feels so wrong. Knowing that it feels so morally bankrupt. Knowing that there are people out there for which experiencing this and losing that fun is not a choice. Right? We'll still, you know, I will still, like, have fun. And, you know, sometimes all you can do is fucking laugh as to not cry about this shit, right? And like, obviously, again, I'm not going to let this take over my whole life, and I'll still have fun in my personal life. But I think I want to use this platform as an educational platform, even if that's going to mean that the vibe is, you know, a little bit less everything's fun and a joke type shit, you know? Unfortunately, the first step of this is acknowledging the problem and facing the horrors of the world. That's also true. Yeah, it's also true, Zero. If you ignore it long enough, you won't be privileged enough to ignore it anymore. It's really, again, it's that poem. First they came for, then they came for, then they came for, and I said nothing. For I was not, for I was not, for I was not. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up for me. So, you're not wrong, Fox. I don't blame you at all. But, you know, it's about damn time. I will try to not have, like, long term, I will try to not have the mood here just, like, constantly be doom and gloom. And that's why I always want, you know, that's why I try to, you know, that's why I try to, like, even in this stream, you know, multiple times, I'm like, the thing that gets us out of here is loving life and human connection and friendship, right? I can't be as jokey about the things I'm talking about because I'm talking about, like, real, honest to God atrocities of human rights and murders of hundreds of thousands of people. So I can't just make a joke out of it the way I can make a joke out of a guy who wakes up on DP every single time I knock them down. But I will at least try and maintain a vibe that is not entirely doom and gloom and awful and everything's horrible, you know? It might not be as lighthearted, but it will not just be negativity all the time. Because I don't think that's productive. It's good to have activist outlets with enjoying your life. I agree. Yes, yes. Anyways, fellas, for now, it's definitely important to at least educate yourself, do what you can in your area. Yes, yes, yes. We still have the power to turn the boat around to some capacity right now, yes. And if enough of us unite, we always have the power to turn the boat around. That's the thing. If enough of us unite, we always have the power to turn our boat around. There are so many of us, and just not that many of them. Right? My sister being disabled has really been affecting my family's ability to make change. Listen, put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. Don't light yourself on fire to keep other people warm, right? Do what you can. You may have heard this one. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. You might have heard that one before. It's a good line. Do what you can. Just be honest with yourself about how much you can do. Because it is very easy. I'm not saying this is, obviously I'm not talking about your sister's disability. I am not talking about that at all. But other things, you know. It is very easy to find excuses to do nothing. Oh, well, you know, people probably don't want to talk about this stuff anyway. Oh, well, it's awkward to, like, you know, make friends with, like, go up and talk to people, you know, knock on my neighbor's door or whatever. It is really easy to find excuses. Do what you can. Don't do more than you can. But be honest with yourself about what it is you can do. There are things that are uncomfortable and difficult that you can do. Think about it. But don't overburden yourself or light yourself on fire to keep others warm. Again, put your own oxygen mask on first before assisting others. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Keep that shit in mind. Anyways, fella. There's like 7 of you in here, so it's basically fella. Anyways, fellas. For the small amount of you that are still here, I really appreciate it. You're helping me. You know, any feedback that you have, by the way, about things you think I could do to make this content more interesting or engaging for you, I want to hear, you know? I might not agree with everything, but I want to hear it. Things you think I could do better. Video ideas that are educational and relevant in this format. Anything like that, please let me know. You can do it in the required reading section of the Discord as well. I think that has sort of become the de facto sort of political conversation sphere. But for now, I'm going to go play some Three Houses. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I will see you tomorrow, where we're going to make a presentation about this and talk about it. Peace.